Advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. We're back live. That's right. Traven and I took a couple of days away and we played some oldies but goodies, but we are back live and I'm glad to be here. Missed you, but man, did I enjoy having some unfettered time off. That everybody needs that from time to time, right? And hopefully we all survived that. Thrilled to be here with you. We're going to be with you for the next hour talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. We're trying to help you with information and inspiration. That's really the mission here at Autism Live, information and inspiration. And by the way, that goes for the entire autism community. And I'm talking about the bigger, larger autism community, of course, that starts with individuals who are on the autism spectrum, but then we include everyone who loves those individuals because that truly is the community to me. And that community is big and beautiful and talented and capable of doing so much if we can figure out some things that we agree upon, right? We're never going to agree on all things because everybody's different and everybody's story is different and everybody's journey is different. But I think we can all agree that individuals on the autism spectrum deserve dignity, respect, employment, housing, support when necessary, right? Consideration, and a place at the table, as our friend Joanne Laura always used to say. So I think we can all agree on those things. And if we can, then we can move forward and figure out what we need individually while we're moving in that direction as a community. So good morning, Raquel. So glad that you're here with us this morning, which brings me to the fact that you guys can be writing in and have your voice heard. This show is collaborative. We love to hear from you guys. We love to know what your thoughts are, your questions, your concerns. We love to chat. That's what we love to do. So there are many different ways that you can connect with us here. One of them is our homepage, autism-live.com. I'm not able to get the live feature working yet this morning, but I haven't given up hope on that. Normally, there is a place where you can chat with us directly on that page, but a lot of you prefer to chat with us on Facebook Live or on YouTube, and we certainly love talking to you on those places. Don't forget, and you can be watching us live there too. Don't forget, you can also watch us live on Twitter and Periscope, and that we podcast to many different places, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Deezer. I do like to point out to you that our show is free in all the places that we put it, and we are, commercial free. There are times we used to, when we would do the show in the studio, where we would play you sort of interstitial, sometimes commercials for things that we talk about here on the show, but we're largely commercial free. And so you might be thinking to yourself, well, how are they doing this, right? We do have sponsors that underwrite us, and that's really, really important to us. But the only reason why they underwrite us is if we're reaching families, because that's what they want us to do. So every view that you watch us or that you encourage other people to watch us ensures that we're on the air. And now during these difficult times, that's never more important than ever. So it's more important than ever. I don't know what I just said. My mouth is on vacation still. So I want to encourage you to watch the show when it's appropriate for you, but to share it. Our friend Danny Bowman says sharing is caring. So please share the show in whatever way is comfortable to you on Facebook, on YouTube. You can also like us on Facebook. That counts for things. And subscribe to us on YouTube. That also All of that aggregate keeps us on the air. We've been on the air now for 9 years. So we appreciate you guys being here with us and letting other people know. We don't have a marketing budget. Let me be very clear. You know, if you've seen an ad for Autism Live, I can't claim it. I don't know who did it. I think twice we've done little Facebook ads, twice in 9 years. So please be our marketing people for us and get the word out, because we think that we've got something useful to a lot of people. But if they don't find it, you know, it's that tree in the forest thing, right? I do like to remind you at the start of this show that we have lots of experts on the show, and I'm really excited about the expert that we have on Mondays, usually on Mondays, and we have her today. Bonnie Yates is going to be joining us in a few minutes. But we have experts all week long, but I just don't want you to confuse me as one of the experts. Yes, I'm your host. And my credentials are that I am a former teacher, and once a teacher, always a teacher. And I have a beautiful, wonderful, talented child who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. So I have a vested interest in this community, right? And you know, that's really why I'm here, because I got the help and support that I needed. So he got the help and support that he needed, and his life is rich and full, and my life is rich and full. So I have some karmic debt to pay down. So I want to help you, but I'm not an expert. But, you know, write in. And I like to say that I have an informed opinion, because I've interviewed a lot of people. I would venture to say I've interviewed more people about autism probably than anybody else in the world. So, you know, I've picked up a little information along the way, but not an expert. Okay. Informed opinion, care about you. Yes. Expert, no. All right. But we really love it when you guys write in. We absolutely do. Which brings me to my next thing. I was so loved on Saturday night while I was in the middle of something that was really frustrating the bewutzits out of me. Somebody wrote to me and on Facebook and said, I just want to thank you so much for the jargon of the day and how much it's helping them while they're in school to be able to understand these terms. And it just made my entire evening. So on Mondays, 3 days a week, we like to do the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani nani are the experts talking about? What does it have to do with us? Do we really need to learn this term? And often the answer is yes. Right? So what we do here is we give you, first we give you the actual definition, which often we make fun of, because that's really all there is to do, because otherwise it's useless. And then we give you a working definition and hopefully some examples. And sometimes you still won't get it. And I don't ever want you to beat yourself up about that. We've all been there, right? But eventually, you know, the concept of it is sort of there. It's like an earworm, and you're like, I don't really know what that is. But eventually you're going to see it, and what, you know, you'll put it all together and you'll go, oh, I get it. And then you'll turn to the dark side and start using the term too. It can't be helped. You stick around long enough, it happens. But that's why we do this. Now, the irony of all of this is that we started doing this because we couldn't understand what the experts were saying. So here's the hilarity of it. Apparently, even the experts couldn't understand themselves. So the experts are telling their students to come here to watch the jargon so that they can hear it explained in a way that will make sense to them and get the parent perspective on it. Now, that makes me happy. That's like, you know, bucket list check. But it also, I want to stay true to what it was in the beginning. It's for parents and people on the spectrum who are like, I don't get what they're talking about, right? So today's a good one, because I bet you that it's going to be easy to understand, so we won't make as much fun of it. But you're going to hear these, especially as we start gearing up to go back to school. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today on the show, it's going to be more important than ever that we're talking about the services, right? And this is one of the services that you're going to get offered through your school district. You should anyway. SLP. It's not somebody's initials. It's very close to being my initials, but it's not. So let's take a look at what our actual definition of SLP. What does SLP stand for? Of course, it's a speech and language pathologist. Okay, great. But if you don't know, if you've never met a speech and language pathologist before, you're no closer to knowing, like, okay, great. What has that got to do with autism? And what will a speech and language pathologist do? So let's go ahead and look at our working definition to see who these folks are. This is a person who works on speech production, articulation, and social communication. And this is super important that we understand these different categories of what an SLP does, because some of them have strength in two and not as much in the third one. And you want to make sure that you have somebody who's working on all three of these things. So, and these things are vital. I want you to know that I have so much respect for SLPs and for an SLP's space on an autism team. I really, really do. But in a second, we're going to talk about what an SLP doesn't do. Okay. So speech production is super important, because if we have kiddos that they have not been speaking, and therefore speaking is not reinforcing to them, right? And if you watch the show, we talk a lot about one of the first early things that we do is we try to get the child to mand so that they're requesting something. So before the child came out of the womb and they wanted a drink, milk, water, juice, they would, and you'd shove a bottle in their face, right? That was the way they communicated. And then for a typically developing kid, they start to say, whoa, to say water, right? And it takes them like 2 years to be able to say water, because they don't have the facial muscles, they don't have the tongue muscle to be able to say water and be able to be understood. Now, for our kiddos on the autism spectrum, they might have bypassed that whole thing and they didn't work on those facial muscles and they didn't say wah wah, right? Or we didn't understand what they were asking for, or they weren't asking for it, whatever. So what we often end up with is a kid who's 3, 4, or 5, and we're starting to work on speech and getting them to request, and they start to request things, but nobody understands them. Or mom understands, but she's the only person, or dad, or the nanny understands, but nobody else understands, because we don't have the musculature to be able to pronounce the sounds and to do the articulation to say water, right? Because if you have a 5-year-old who says wah, 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 people aren't going to understand that means water, only the people closest to them. So it's super important that we're working on these things with our kids, right? But then there's the third piece, which is social communication. Because so often I will hear from families and they'll go, how do I get to conversation? My child can talk now. It's funny, I wished and wished and wished for my child to talk. Well, my child can talk now. And he can say, want car and want juice. But how do I get to conversation? The speech and language pathologist person can hold up a card and he can say, look at the picture and he can say card or car. If it's a picture of a car, but how do I get him to say to me, I want a red car. What kind of car do you want? Now that's all under the heading of social communication as far as an SLP is concerned. And you can get them to work on it, but you need to be asking them to work on it. Sometimes they'll say, oh, well, we're working on pragmatic language, but definitely talk to your SLP about this portion of the program. Because there are some great SLPs out there that can help to, along with a really good ABA program, they can help to pull that language into a place where it's age appropriate. But I want to say this with love and respect, that if you have a child who's not talking and going to an SLP and saying, they're going to take care of this end to end, I got to tell you, you need a hug. Because they can't. There are lots of things about speech that your child is going to have to learn that are not under the heading of what an SLP does, okay? But secondly, you're never going to get the funding level for an SLP to get your child to where you want them to go because of what I just said. They don't have that bag of tricks to do the whole thing by themselves, okay? So what you want, if you're going for speech, the ideal is that you, especially if you've got a young child who is not yet at school, you want to be doing a 40-hour ABA program with an SLP doing additional time. It might be an hour or 2 a week. And if you can, I mean, my preference is always get the 40-hour and fight to get the SLP on top of that. That's the creme de la creme. You are guaranteeing that your child is being able to make the most progress that they possibly can with speech if you do that. If it becomes a trade-off and you're like, there are some funders who will say we won't fund more than 40 hours a week. I don't know where they came up with that arbitrarily. Because really every waking hour of your child's time should be educational, right? But they go, well, that's where they draw the line and they go, it's just too much for a child, which is hilarious because we all used to say that. I used to say that. I was like, 40 hours, he's too little. The truth of the matter is that a typical 3-year-old is learning all the time. Their entire world is a classroom because they're soaking it all in. For our kids, we have to make it a little bit more directed, but it's still got to be a classroom all the time. So if you really can't, if they won't go over 40 hours, and if your ABA provider says, look, we can only give you therapists for 38 hours, then yes, take the other 2 hours and do the speech and language pathologist for the week. But if you had a choice at 3 for doing 40 hours of ABA or 38, I would do 40. And here's why. A lot of times the stuff that the SLP does really well comes in handy later. And you're definitely going to get the SLP when your child goes to kindergarten. So I would rather work on all the things that the ABA does at 3, because they will work on some of this with your child also, and then continue with the SLP at school age. That's only if you can't do both. I would do both if you can, but if you can't, I would prioritize ABA. Thanks. Somebody says, I think it's great to have jargon of the day. It helps me to explain things to the parents of my students in layman's terms. Woohoo! We love that. So there you go. SLP, very important person on the team. Very important. All right, moving on. We always have a question of the day for you. And our question today is, what's the hardest part of your day? And I got a reason why I'm asking that, because sometimes we just suffer through it, right? We're like, oh, I know I've told this story before on the show where the hardest part of the day for me was getting my child out of the freaking car. And, it was getting him out of the car when we were coming home from school, and we were living in a condo that was on a very busy street, and there was never any parking. So I had to park on the street with cars flying by. It took a kid being hit by a car before they put in a speed bump. So it literally was like a life and death issue to me. And my child would dilly-dally and not get out of the car. And I'd be like, one of us is going to get hit by a car. And it was the whole getting the backpack and so on and so forth. And I was just suffering through it and having the lining of my stomach eaten every day. It was like walking through the lion's den with my child every day. And I finally, said something to our ABA team and said, this is the hardest part of my day. And they were like, oh, well, let's work on it. Oh, let's work on it. And what was amazing was they worked on it with me first and said, okay, tell us what's going on. Show us what's going on. Let's pick a time when it's not busy outside. And show us exactly what's going on and what the sequence is. And so they changed my sequence just a smidge, right? And they had me, one of the things that was like, oh my gosh, how silly am I? They had me put his backpack on the other side of the car, not on the same side of the car as him, because I was trying to get him to get his backpack out of the same side of the car. And so instead they had, so driver's side, I've got to get out of the car first, right? And so I'm watching for the traffic, and then I would open the door, get him out, walk him to the sidewalk, and then I would open the passenger door and he would get the backpack out of the passenger door. Solved the problem. So, and I had done it the other way for 6 months, putting our lives in jeopardy, right? So I'm asking you, what's the hardest part of your day? And maybe let's take a look at it and see if we can't winnow it down with a fresh set of eyes that isn't you and doesn't have all the stress from it, and figure out, can we fix this? Now, if you have if you are lucky enough to have an ABA team working with you, I just encourage you right now, open an email and send your supervisor an email about the hardest part of your day and say, hey, I was just thinking about this. Do you know what the hardest part of my day is? When he goes to bed and I can't get rest and he gets up a million times. Can we work on this? Like, boom, change your life right here, right now. Right? How exciting would that be? If you don't have the benefit of working with an ABA team, I would encourage you to like open an email and reach out to somebody and say, I need ABA. But we can talk about what the hardest part of your day is here and try to figure it out ourselves and figure out how can we make it easier. Because I guarantee you, whatever the hardest part of your day is could be better. I'm not saying it would be hearts, flowers, roses, and like poof, it's pink, and it's all automatically better, like all better, but it can be better than it is right now. I guarantee you. But we got to take it, look at it, open it up, shed a little light on it, and then take it apart a little bit. And then it will be better. Okay, so we're going to be talking about that from time to time throughout this week. And we always have a topic for the week. And so our topic for the week, dun, 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 dun. I don't remember what it is, Traven, so I got to wait for you. Admitting when something isn't working, of course. I don't know about you, but this is one of the hardest things in the world for me. I once went to a conference and somebody was giving a talk about how we are creatures of habit and how we will keep doing something. And they mentioned the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, which I've heard that. It doesn't apply to me. I don't know what you're talking about, right? But then somebody put it in different words. And the speaker said, have you ever looked at the window ledge inside your house of a screened window? And do you see, what's there? That often there's like one or two dead flies just inside your windowsill where there's a screen. And he said, do you ever think about why that is? And he said, because, they've done studies on this. And what it is that the fly can see the outside. It doesn't understand the screen. And so it sticks by the screen and it keeps flying at the screen, thinking eventually I'm going to get through that screen. And it dies. It dies right there at the screen, trying to get out, never once turning around and looking and going, oh, look, there's a whole room that I could be flying around in, and occasionally people open a door. But they die there on the windowsill. And the truth of the matter, I'm guilty of this. Like just like me with the car and getting out of the car, it's just like, I just kept doing it that way and going, this is horrible, right? Instead of going, okay, this is not working. What could I possibly do that's different? And I listen, it wouldn't have mattered. I couldn't have gotten to it on my own. It just wouldn't have occurred to me. I was that entrenched in what I was doing. But what I did do differently is that I mentioned it to somebody else. I don't even know that I was looking for help when I did it. I just said, oh, I hate it when we get out of the car. Like I wanted to move. And I wanted to move for many reasons, but I just was blaming it on that. I was like, I hate this condo and I hate that we live here because of this one little incident. I mean, there were other things too, why I hated that condo. But the first step is admitting that something isn't working. And there's no shame in that of going, okay, this isn't working. And it could be something small, or it could be something big. I don't know about you, but so many times during this COVID thing, while we're all home and spending all this time at home, we've had to revamp how our house is set up. And our house looks significantly different than when we started this because it had to work. And it wasn't working for us with the things that we need to do at home. And then every time something new gets added, like my son started taking some classes online. Some of the things that we recommended a couple of weeks ago, he took one of the classes at the Theatricum Botanicum. And it meant that our house had to work differently for an hour and a half a day. and that we had to have, cameras with, because his computer doesn't have a camera. So we had to have a camera on a computer set up in a different place. Um, and and the first day we did it one way and we were like, oh yeah, that's not working. So we had to change it. So the first step is admitting, okay, that's not working, with total abandon, and not having it be accusatory, and not being like, duh, why did I not realize that this is not going to work? It's just like, oh, okay, this isn't working. No harm, no foul. What will we do differently? So I'm asking you this week, if it was just you and I, privacy moment, nobody's going to tell on anybody, what's not working in your life? And you can start with that question that we asked today about what's the hardest part of your day, because I guarantee you there's something that isn't working about that hardest part of your day. And I know from experience, like that whole situation with my son in the car, I was like, he has autism. So he is just not understanding that there's cars and that there's danger and that he's got to get out quicker. And I was blaming it all on that. And then lo and behold, the therapist came and they were like, you need to organize your crap and you need to think this through and do this in a different way. It had nothing to do with him and everything to do with me. So we got to be humble and go, okay, maybe what I'm doing isn't the right way to go about it. It doesn't make me wrong, but we can do something better. Okay, we're wasting Bonnie time. So we got a big show for you right now. We're welcoming Bonnie Yates to the show. I think she's there. Is she? I don't see her actually. Draven, is she in the waiting room? Bonnie Yates is a special education attorney, and she works with the Tollner Law Offices. And she is supposedly going to be here with us if she can do the math on the time. And she's going to be talking with us about, we started this topic 2 weeks ago about how sometimes schools are retaliatory and they will turn families into child protective services as an intimidation. I mean, sometimes schools do that because it's necessary, but we're aware of times that schools have done this as an intimidation tactic to try to get families to stand down. If you're, I was certainly worried about that and thought that had happened to me. When my son was 3, here in California, the school district meets with you right before your child's 3rd birthday to talk to you about what your child will be doing in school. And they offer you early services from the age of 3. And that first woman, I was so excited because we had not yet started ABA, and I like wanted to get anything going. I was so desperate. And she came and she visited with us and she met my son, and we had already gotten a diagnosis of autism on our own. We had just done it privately. We were in the process of getting the secondary diagnosis through the regional center here in California. And so this really sweet woman, she was just one of those lovely sort of, like an aunt figure, came and sat on my couch, and, I made her a cup of herbal tea, and she had all this paperwork, and she was talking to me about my child with my child in the room. And she said, have you gotten a diagnosis? And I said, yes, we got a diagnosis of autism. And she said, oh, what a relief. And I said, well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Why do you say that? And she said, well, because we only have 7 categories where we can allow children to start services at 3. And she started going down the list. And she said, and if your child doesn't qualify under any of these, then what we do is we deem them. And then she used the R word. And she said, and then we bring them, and although she said MR, I don't even like to say the MR. You all know what I'm talking about, right? I don't want to say it here. And so she said the R word, and she said, so we would deem your child MR, and that way he would have services. And I said, what? And I said, I don't think you're supposed to use that. Now, keep in mind, this is 15 years ago, right? And I said, I don't think you're supposed to use that word anymore. And she said, well, that is in the state of California, that is still the word, that is the medical diagnosis, that is the word that we use. And shortly after that, they changed it to developmentally delayed and global delays and things of that such, but they were still saying it then. And I said, and you would be here and you would say that my child was MR? And she was like, oh, yeah, that's how we get him services. And I just started to sob. I sat there and cried. Like, I thought after he got the diagnosis of autism, that like there was nothing you could say that was going to be able to have that big of an impact on me. But for whatever reason, it was like carpet pulled right out from under my feet. And I sat there and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And that's, so she said to me, oh, don't worry, my dear, don't worry, because we're going to take him as soon as he turns 3, he's going to start school services and we're going to have him for 8.5 hours a day. And it's all going to be so much better. And I was like, well, we want ABA. Are you doing ABA? And she said, oh, we do something like ABA, right? We're off to the races now. Like ABA. I don't want like ABA. There's no study show that like ABA works. I want ABA, intensive one-to-one ABA. Do you do it or not? Oh, you'll have to look at the program, right? So we went and looked at the program, and it was horrible. They took us to this trailer at the end of a dirt road, and there were kids in there that were beating their heads against a wall, and they were letting them on an administrative walkthrough. So we said, I said over my dead body, is my child going to this program, right? And we started to fight for funding for our child to get ABA at home. And we have ABA started at home, and we're fighting with the school district about this. And there comes a knock at my door. And I'd heard stories about them turning parents into CPS. And so it was a fear of mine. And so there's a knock at the door, and it's a process server. And he, slams the paper. He said, are you Shannon Penrod? Yes. He slams the papers down. He goes, you've been served. And it's like so vicious, and my child is crying. And it was because the school district had filed due process against us. They sued us to prove that what they were offering in their crappy classroom was the thing that was right. And the wording of it in the beginning, I didn't have a lawyer at that point, but I was calling lawyers because they were saying that what we wanted to do with him was unethical and not in his best interest, and that they wanted the court to rule that it was in his best interest to do what they said. And to me, that sounded like they were asking for custody of him. They weren't, and that was explained to me eventually, but I thought the top of my head was going to blow off. I have gone through it with other parents where Child Protective Services contacted them and came to do a well check. And in one case where the child was taken away from the home for a period of time because the school district had reported and said that they thought that the child was being mistreated. So it's not a small thing. It's not a paranoid thing. I don't think it happens as often as we're afraid as that happens, but does that matter? Because the people that happens to, it's very, very, very scary. So Bonnie is going to talk with us about that at some point, but she does not appear to be here. So I am going to, in the interim, look at some of the things that you guys have said. And somebody wrote in and said that, oh, she is here. Okay. But I do want to get to the person worrying about their child wandering. There's Miss Bonnie. How are you?
I'm good.
Good morning. I've missed you. You look lovely.
Thank you.
I was telling them that about the fact that you were going to talk a little bit about school districts and retaliation, and I hadn't gotten to the fact that we hopefully are going to have a little chat about. We know more now than we knew 2 weeks ago about remote services, but we still don't know enough. But so tell us about Tollner Law Offices and give us the disclaimer, and then chat with us.
Hello. Tollner Law Offices is an 8-attorney law firm based in San Jose, California, with offices in Los Angeles and Irvine. And we do special education and disability discrimination and higher education and regional center stuff. And it's been an interesting several months. Okay, so wait, I just lost my place, sorry. So if you wanna talk to us and you're in California, you can go to the Tollner Law Office's website, fill in a form, and somebody will call you back within 24 hours, and we can have a more focused conversation about what the concerns are, and I know there are plenty of concerns now. I would urge you guys to reach out and not just slide into doom and gloom about how there's nothing you can do. If you're outside of California, we recommend you to COPA, the Council of Parent Advocates and Attorneys. They have an attorney list that's quite good. And there's so much changing and so quickly, and there's kind of a big inefficiency in the way that one potentially approaches this, because it's like taking somebody's temperature every 15 seconds. So I've sort of decided that I'm going to balance out our calls in the sense that I don't just want to talk about triage stuff and the here and now that might change again in 4 weeks. I just don't know. So we're going to do some of that, but we're also going to continue to do what we did before, which was talk about issues of broad applicability for parents, so that you're getting educated as you listen to this show, so that you can better advocate for your child, which is the longer term goal of this program. So I'm sure most parents know that there are agencies that are charged with the responsibility for protecting vulnerable elderly and incompetent adults, and then also children. And for children, the agency in California is the Department of Children and Family Services. It's a different agency for adults. But after I started doing special ed for a while, I noticed that there was sometimes a nexus between a kid who had an IEP and a situation at school, and the family being reported to the Department of Children and Family Services. Now, those agencies exist to protect children, and they have an important role to play. And this is not supposed to be a critique of the need for and the fact of the existence of that agency. The problem is that people can abuse the system, and that sometimes happens. And so specifically what I'm saying is, there are people that are categorized as mandated reporters. And that means that if they observe what they suspect to be child abuse, they are responsible for reporting it. And that would include people like your behavior therapist or any related service provider. It would also certainly include a teacher, potentially another parent, although parents aren't mandated reporters. If you're a mandated reporter like a teacher or a psychologist, if you don't report, you actually can be criminally liable. So that's one way that the system ensures that bad situations get reported. The other thing about it is that the system offers those reporters, mandated reporters, have absolute immunity from prosecution. So there's no way really, unless there are very egregious facts, there's no way for somebody to quote unquote get in trouble for making a false report. Well, what has come to my attention and what is very concerning is that sometimes teachers report parents for IEP advocacy. And so they report them for something that parents are allowed to do, which is take strong positions at IEP meetings. And sort of rather than having a face-to-face discussion with the parent and trying to get at what the issue is that is bothering the teacher so much, the teacher may go to DCFS and actually make a report, and the teacher probably knows that the report is going to be unfounded, but the teacher also knows that the parents are going to go through a lot of stress about the possibility of having their child removed from the home. So imagine being that parent who all of a sudden one night you're at home and you have a knock on the door, and somebody comes in and he tells you that you've been reported for abuse and he's here to check it out, and he wants to interview each of you separately. So that would mean your child, your husband, and yourself. That in and of itself, for any parent that understands that in dependency court, parents are stripped temporarily of their rights to provide, to be the custodial person for the child for an indefinite amount of time sometimes. Now, there's different bases of reporting parents. It's not just abuse. Parents can also be reported for neglect. And neglect is a very interesting term because sometimes people within DCFS have construed a particular type of medical treatment as abuse or neglect. And, that should prick up everybody's attention, because I know some of you use alternative modalities in terms of treating your kids, and you may have doctors that espouse positions that aren't in keeping with, let's say, the mainstream medical community. And DCFS is very interested in making sure that if you are doing that kind of stuff, you have a conventional, like, family pediatrician who coordinates care and kind of keeps an eye on everything. And there's no legal requirement that you do that, but that's just something DCFS looks out for or watches for. Another thing that comes under this umbrella of stuff is accusing the parent of essentially having Munchausen's syndrome, which, for those of you that don't know, means that the person who's caring for the child gets some kind of gratification or a sense of self-importance from creating health problems for the child that don't exist. And they get attention and they get validation. And it's not to say that it isn't a legitimate syndrome, but it is to say that you can see how that kind of allegation, if used against a parent, would be very, very serious if it weren't true. And it would also be devastating for a parent. So I'm still in the process of kind of working my way through one of these cases, which the end result of which is now the district has come to me and said, write me a demand letter. But it didn't start out that way. It started out with a teacher who was unhappy because these parents, wasn't even these parents, it was that these parents came in the wake of another set of parents who she felt had used up too much of her time in IEP meetings. And she basically was heard to say, I'm not going to let anybody do that to me again. So these parents had to step in and advocate for their child because the teacher was trying to transfer him out of her class without an IEP meeting. And we stopped that. But that made the teacher mad. So the teacher reported the parents, and the parents had to go through a DCFS investigation. So the first part of it was that somebody came to their home and interviewed all three of them separately and concluded that there wasn't enough evidence of abuse to remove the child from the home. The second part of this is that the DCFS scheduled an in-person meeting in their offices where the parents were interviewed by a social worker, an attorney, and a nurse for DCFS. And that's when I got in there and I could really see what the allegations were. And the third part of this was that so the parents had to, in order to justify everything they had done to treat their child, they had to start when he was 2 and explain to these strangers his entire medical history and every upsetting thing that had ever happened. And the parents had really good documentation and they were quite polite, but there were points at which the mother broke down and cried in re-experiencing what had already happened and then sort of being victimized by this whole process. So the parents then waited for 2 months, during which time, they had their fingers crossed that nothing bad was going to happen. And in fact, nothing did. And they got a report after 2 months telling them that the charges were not substantiated. The part I didn't tell you, there's a couple of parts I didn't tell you. One is the teacher mentioned to a third party that she had reported them. And the third party repeated that to somebody else because she thought it was wrong. But the other things that can happen and didn't happen in this case are you can actually, if the charges are substantiated, you will end up with a case in family court or dependency court where you're basically trying to persuade the state not to take your child away from you and put your child into foster care. And the stakes are quite high, and you will definitely have to hire an attorney, and you may lose your child. And this for me was it was pretty shocking that this teacher knew what was going to happen, and she did it anyway, because these are nice people. They're not difficult people. They give as good as they get, meaning if they ask you to do something, they're going to put in their 100%, hold up their part of the bargain. But I'm told, and there are some articles that document this, that this is one way that parents are retaliated against for exercising their special education ideas, let's just say, on behalf of their child. And why do I mention this? I mention this not because it's going to happen to you, but I just mention it because I think it's wrong. It's retaliatory. And I just want you guys to know, what kind of stuff goes on out there, because it's bad out there sometimes. And this was an instance of that.
And, a couple of things strike me, Bonnie. I mean, first of all, I get it that they can't be prosecuted for wrongly accusing or having an unsubstantiated claim. But could those parents now turn around and sue the school for pain and suffering,
Yes.
like a civil case?
So good. She's so good, you guys. There's no immunity for the school district. There is immunity for the teacher. But also I think if it could be shown that the teacher knowingly made a false report, I think that might be a situation in which she would be stripped of her immunity. But anyway, I mean, there was not a lot of love lost between the district and this teacher, from what I understand, and she'd had problems for years and the union protected her. So, guess who's going to be left holding the bag? It's the district.
Yeah.
But that's what happens if this is a certain type of teacher, and we got to be on the lookout for this person. They've been there a very long time. They're burned out. They yell at the kids, even when outside observers are present in the classroom. They think they're untouchable. They sometimes are like running roughshod over the principal, and they need help. They need some kind of help.
Or no, they need a new job is what they need.
Yeah, that too.
But there's a couple of things. I mean, obviously, it super bothers me that parents are going through this, but it also means that if this persists, then in a case where there really is abuse going on, it's possible that will not be looked at as seriously if teachers make these false claims. It's like crying wolf. But I gotta say, the thing it reminds me of, and I think you're the person who said this to me many, many years ago, is that if it looks like somebody doesn't want your kid in their class, don't argue with them about it. Like, have them be put in a different class. I think it was.
Can I just say to that point, she wanted the kid out of her class, but there were 23 days left of school, and she thought, mom and dad thought it'd be very traumatic for him to be transferred out of her class.
But were there no other indications before 23 days before the end of the year?
There were other indications.
The worst year that we had at school, the day before school started, we went to a meeting and with the teacher and the principal and the vice principal, and sat there, and the teacher was obnoxious and didn't want to hear what anybody had to say. And she was like, I've got this, because she had nephews or nieces that were on the spectrum. She was like, I've got this. Everybody needs to, I don't understand why we have to be here for this meeting. And I was telling a friend about it, and they said, get him out of that classroom right now. Go back and say, no, I want to be with, there was only two choices. And they said, get him in the other teacher. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work it out. I'm capable of working it out. And like, it's the biggest regret. I wished I had just said no. Because anybody who says, no, I don't need to know anything is uncurious. They're unintelligent. They're a bad teacher. Like, our kids have no place in there. So I just want to say that to parents, like, it's so hard. I'm a former teacher, and I love teachers, and there are good teachers, but there are some people who are fried or burnt or don't belong in the profession. And if you see any indication that your kid is with one of those kids, I'm all for moving them early. What do you think about that, Bonnie?
Well, you're making me think back to when Nick was in second grade, and he had a teacher like this who'd been there for 25 years, and she knew where all the bodies were buried, and she had the principal, on bended knee. And she basically made it very clear to me that she thought that it was impossible that he could be successfully included in first grade. And she made it very clear to me that she was hostile to the whole idea. And I'm asking myself now why I didn't ask for a teacher change. Was it because I didn't think I could? Was it because I thought the teacher would be, the default teacher wouldn't be any better? But I remember when Nick went into third grade, and this is a person with autism that's just learning how to vocalize these things. He came home and he said to me about the third grade teacher. He said, "Mommy, she's a really nice teacher."
And it breaks your heart. And it breaks your heart permanently.
Yeah.
I can remember, I do think it was you, Bonnie, that said to me that when your school is doing their open house where you can go and see what projects your child was working on, you had said, go to that, but go shop all of the teachers for the next grade to see, what they're like. And that saved him from a different year, because there was one teacher that everybody was telling us, oh, you need to be with this teacher. You need to be with this teacher. And we went over during the open house and we introduced ourselves and we said, oh, our child is, and we said his name. And I know they're thinking about, and she was like, oh, yeah. And I went, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
That is your response. And then, we went to another person's class and they said, I know I'm not on the list, but I would love to have your kid in the classroom. And that's where he went. And that teacher was amazeballs. I mean, I honestly think if somebody is not over the moon excited about your kid, somebody else will be.
Well, I want to say, since I probably have a reputation for maybe not saying enough good stuff about teachers, and I'm married to one, but that his kindergarten teacher was amazing. His first grade teacher was amazing. His third grade teacher was amazing. His fourth grade teacher was amazing. And his fifth grade teacher, who was a really lovely woman, basically said to me, like, I don't think you need to worry about this so much anymore. Like, he's clearly going to be able to be mainstreamed in middle school, So, I mean, that was one in six teachers, but a person like that can do a lot of damage to a child. And I do think, that there are self-esteem issues that we all have from being reprimanded in class, and feeling shamed.
Or just somebody not advocating for you when another person says something.
Yeah.
I go into classrooms sometimes because I'll go in to work on a project. I used to teach theater, so I'll go in and do a one-day thing with grade school kids. And it's always amazing to me. I can tell how good the teacher is, because if a child says something negative to another child, I don't ever let that go.
Mm-hmm.
I go, whoa, let's stop everything. Mm-hmm. What just happened there? And we talk it out. But I'm amazed at how many teachers let that slide. And that's not good for our kids either. Mm-hmm. But I know some teachers that are amazing.
Yeah, really. It's a gift of birth. So apropos teachers, do we have 6 more minutes?
We do.
Okay. So here's what I want to say about school closure, continuing school closure. Obviously, it's district by district, state by state. And if you're in a locality where there's going to be a hybrid model or schools are going to be open, we can address what that'll look like via questions if you want to send questions in. For those of you who are in a district that you're told are not going to be opening in the fall, what I want to do when we're together next is I want to talk about what your alternatives are that would be better than what you had during the last semester, because I think the way we approached distance learning from March to June was, this is a standalone period. It's, short in duration. Everybody's going to get back on the horse and ride. And now we really do have to worry about the longer term academic and, emotional effects of not being in school for children. And there are some other options. And one really outside of the box option that came up last week is, if you had 2 or 3 families and you pooled your resources, potentially you could hire a teacher who would run a little one-room schoolhouse in your house, if you could figure out how to do that health-wise. Another thing is, if you're not in that position, then what you should be doing is you should be looking at your distance learning plan that you got versus what you were supposed to get. And you should be scheduling an IEP meeting with the district so that you can have a meeting in the first 30 days of September so that you can make your district do more than they did during school closure. And, I didn't send this to you, Shannon, I sent it to my office, but there was an article over the weekend in the New York Times about private schools doing more than public schools, having more resources and doing more in response to COVID than public schools. And I do have to say that the students that I know who were in distance learning programs during school closure, who are privately placed private school students, in every case got something that looked a lot more like a robust 6-hour day. So it's not that it cannot be done. And I can't assure you that it's going to be done for everyone, but I can, give you, I think, some measure of confidence that if you ask your district to provide this, they're going to have to come up with a pretty good reason for why they can't do anything more than they've been doing. And we really need to start focusing on how you create a robust school in your home if you don't have one and your school's not reopened.
Yeah, and I want to say, I personally have had some about things that have happened in the last few months with school, and I had to sit myself down and go, okay, there's that, but I gotta be looking at the fall, and and I it's not that I can't carry what happened in the spring into the fall. I gotta let go of the resentment about being right, and just get what my child needs. And I just want to say that lovingly to everybody, because I've had to say it lovingly to myself, is like, I think it's always important, and we call this your rights with you here, that we know what our rights are. But once you know what your rights are, then I think it becomes a dance of, okay, knowing that, how do I get what my child needs? Which is, sometimes, I mean, it should just be about the legal things, but school doesn't respond to that sometimes. We've got a couple of comments here really quick. As a teacher, I want to learn, somebody wrote in and said, as a teacher, I want to learn all that I can about the children that I'm working with. Parents, guardians are one of the best sources of information about our kiddos. You're a great teacher. And we love that. Somebody else said, I show up at IEP meetings with my son's report to show teachers what my son's life is like outside of school, including behaviors we see at home. It gives them a lot of insight. And I've had a lot of positive feedback about it. I think that's awesome too.
Yeah, well, it's clear that expectations play a huge part in what somebody can elicit from a child. And I was always amazed that, no matter the extent of the disability, most kids that I saw with autism could figure out when somebody was angry and didn't like them.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but then, so next week we can dig into some of this and start to figure out what to do. But in the meantime,
send your questions, people, so that we can
specific
react to them and get you some more information.
And in the meantime, though, if Bonnie, like for instance, if somebody feels that they've had the school district retaliate against them, if they're in the state of California, obviously they should come to you. At the Tollner law offices. You guys can Google Tollner, it's 2 L's, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Tollner law offices, and you'll find Bonnie there. And if they're not in the state of California, is that the copa.net site?
It is. And it is. And there are federal laws, Section 504 has an anti-retaliation provision, and so does the California Education Code, and I'll try to supply that for you to disseminate. So there is specific protection in the IDEA for parents who want to advocate for their children, and the notion is they should be able to do so, whether you agree with them or not, without fear of retaliation.
Amen to that.
Because if you retaliate against a parent, the long-term net effect is going to be that parent's going to be afraid to participate at the next IEP meeting.
Yeah,
Or
and we
or
have
see
that
what
right.
their child needs. Yeah. So
Well, Bonnie, we always appreciate you. We will see you back next week. And again, if people have questions, get them over to us. We're happy to answer questions. We like to get them early before the day of the show, so Bonnie has a chance to review them. So you can send those directly to me at s.penrod@autism-live.com. Bonnie, thank you so much for being with us as always, and we will welcome you back next week.
all right, see everybody then. Take
All
care.
right, take care. Bye-bye. And I just wanted to say to you guys, we're having a big week this week. I'm late getting the postcard out because we were off last week, but postcard forthcoming soon. Soon. But one of the things I really don't want you to miss, on Friday, we're having Kathy Gott on, and she's going to be talking about a new place called The Village, which I think everybody is going to find really interesting. And we have Evelyn Kung on Wednesday answering your questions. All right. And I believe that we're having some clips of Temple Grandin tomorrow. I cannot do that for sure. But anyway, thrilled to be back, you guys. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I do the show now in a room that has a very tiny dog in it, and he chose that moment as we were coming live to take a big, I don't know if you could hear him, it just like a horse lapping water. It just cracked me up. Yeah, we're live, and I'm at home, and everybody else on the show today is coming from places far away too. So we're keeping it real. So thrilled to be here with you this morning on this Wednesday morning. As many of you know, on Wednesday mornings, we sometimes have an opportunity to have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh with us for Ask Dr. Doreen. And when we don't have her, we are often lucky enough to have Evelyn Kung with us to do Ask Evelyn Kung. And Evelyn Kung is here with us this morning, and we couldn't be more thrilled about that. Before we get to her, I want to remind all of you that this show is live, and it is Wednesday morning, July 22nd, 2020. And we love to hear from you. And you can be writing into the live show if you're watching us live. There are lots of ways to participate. We really love it when the show is interactive. So if you want to, you can be watching us in a number of different places. You can be watching us on YouTube, on Facebook, on our homepage, autism-live.com, or you could be watching us on Twitter or Periscope. So we are live in all of those places, and pretty much all of those places have a way in which for you to comment. So we look forward to hearing from you. If you're not watching us live, that's okay. Don't feel left out. You still can write into us lots of different ways. You can write on our website. There's a chat, and you can write directly on there. That's www.autism-live.com. Or you can write directly to me, which is what one of our viewers did this morning. My email is s.penrod@autism-live. Now, for those of you who are watching us in podcast, a lot of times you're just listening, like on iTunes or on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Deezer. So let me spell it out for you. S as in Sam, Penrod, which is spelled P as in Peter, E as in egg, N as in Nancy, R as in robot, O as in Oscar, D as in dog, at Autism, which I'm pretty sure you know how to spell that. And then there is a hyphen or a dash. It's the line in the middle, and that it is live. L as in lollipop, I as in igloo, V as in Victor, E as in egg.com. s.penrod at autism-live.com. All right, so I hope you'll write into us with your thoughts, your questions, your concerns, anything. You know, sometimes you just need to let somebody else know what's going on. We are here as a resource. We hope to provide you information and inspiration. And that means sometimes that we need to track down resources for you. We do our level best. Sometimes we are inundated and we have more requests than we can handle. We try to do our best to handle what you guys send us. All right, having said that, one of our great resources that we have a lot of experts that are on the show. I always like to remind you the disclaimer that even though we have experts on the show, they can't give individual specific advice because that would be a disservice to the person that the advice is about. And but we can pick their brains and try to figure out the things that they know so that we have more questions to ask the experts who actually have eyes on. Let me also say too, as we start the show, that our show is meant for the large autism community, which starts with individuals who are on the spectrum. Of course, it starts with them. Everything starts with them, but we include everyone who loves them, everyone who cares about an individual who's on the autism spectrum, be that a parent, sibling, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, teacher, therapist, pediatrician. You care about some teacher, did I already say that? You care about somebody on the spectrum, I hope you'll find a home here. We know that one size doesn't fit all and that you have questions, and we'd like to help you to get to that information and inspiration, let's get that word right, that you're looking for. So having said all of that, we want to welcome back to the show, Evelyn Kung. Evelyn, are you there?
I am here. Hi, good morning.
So good to see you.
It's good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you for, I was saying before, you regularly save our bacon and are here, and it's just such a delight. And we thank you so much for being here. Evelyn, tell them a little bit about your experience in the field of autism and what you do at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders.
Well, I've been here a long, long time. I predate the BCBA certificate. So it's been almost 30 years now of being in this field and working with kids with autism and adults. And I've done training. I've been training supervisors and just giving consultation probably for the last 25 years heavily. And then the other part of my job in the last 10 years is developing our skills curriculum. So my technology skills have increased quite a bit, but just being able to work on all the systems that support ABA. And, you know, whether it's in curriculum or data collection or whatever, but my real love and joy is still in consulting on kids and trying to problem solve and trying to help families figure out, you know, how to make life work, essentially. So
which you are amazing at, and we all run to you for advice about those kinds of things. I can't think of the number of times that I've been like, we got to get Evelyn on the case. We got to get Evelyn on the phone. So, and though, although you said you predate the title of BCBA, you are a BCBA.
Yeah, I am.
I just want to make that clear for people who are wondering. So we frequently have people who will write in questions to us throughout the week, and those are sort of our starter questions that we start. And somebody had written in a question last night and this morning that I didn't even get a chance to send to Evelyn. So the person says, I have a question. I hope it'll make it on today's segment. I have a 3-year-old son. He gets 30 hours a week of ABA. His BCBA mentioned to me that she's going to incorporate relational frame theory in his treatment plan. I tried to read it in the internet, what relational frame theory is and how it's applied to children with autism. However, I still don't understand how RFT is applied and what its difference from traditional ABA. And can you please help me understand? Now, Evelyn, as I understand it, you know, you are absolutely an expert in the field of autism and you're an expert in the field of ABA, but I'm guessing that you are not an expert in the field of RFT. That would be asking.
Yeah, I am not an RFT expert, but I predate RFT.
There we go. There we go.
So
So you know a little bit.
So I know a little bit because when people started researching it, they came to CARD and they said, what do you guys do? Because in reality, relational frame theory is what they call a modern ABA technique.
Okay.
So what happens is ABA is an umbrella. And under the umbrella of ABA, there are all these different types of techniques that can be used to teach language, skills, whatever it may be. So, you know, under the umbrella of ABA, you might hear about discrete trial training or natural environment training or pivotal response training, or, you know, and RFT lands under one of those. It's not a technique for learning, but it's probably like an area of how kids learn. And the area it relates to that I do know a lot about is perspective taking. Okay, so perspective taking is a primary area of a deficit in autism. People with autism have a really hard time taking someone else's perspective. And, you know, you might hear the term theory of mind. And it's like just the idea of mind or perspective taking. In the ABA world, they had a really hard time dealing with those terms because it wasn't concrete. Everything is operationally defined in the ABA world. And it was very difficult to define what mind was or perspective without using the term in a way of what they would in ABA is called circular reasoning. One exists without using another, and you kind of go in this circle, and none of it's very concrete and operationally defined enough. So relational frame theory came out of trying to define how some kind of verbal thought would relate to learning. And so RFT has really taken off in the last 10 years because they had to figure out a way to how to describe, you know, this idea of mind or perspective and how you learn. And so there is no way I'm an expert in it, and I won't even try to say what it actually is. But what it relates to in let's say in our terms or in our skills curriculum term, which is all based on research also, is the idea of perspective taking, be able to take somebody else's perspective. And in real life and development, the beginning of perspective taking starts around 9 months old. And it's the baby sitting in the high chair, and they drop their sippy cup, and mom reaches over and picks it up and puts it back on. And then there's this, let me see if I throw it again, will they pick it up again? And lo and behold, it's like this amazing cause and effect idea that starts to form, that if I do this, it makes somebody else respond. And from there, you start to see the idea of senses, like I can smell a perfume and I think, well, mommy, this smells good. But then somebody else smells it and they're like, ew, yucky. And that's at the beginning of the formation of the idea of, I like this smell, but you don't. And in the real world, real perspective taking, the example I always use comes around 4 to 5 years old. And I always use the example of playing hide and seek. Because in kindergarten, typically, the majority of the kids actually can't play hide and seek. They're giggling in the corner, their arms are sticking out of places they're hiding because they don't realize that somebody else can see or hear them when they're hiding. But by the end of kindergarten, the majority of the kids can play hide and seek, and they're actually much better at it. They still might have issues like how loud they're laughing and giggling in the corner, you know, and there are some kids that still have arms and legs sticking out of, you know, everywhere, so everybody can find them immediately. But you can really see that in that kindergarten year, how their idea of, I have to think, like, I don't want this person to find me, so I have to be quiet, or I don't want this person to find me, so wherever I'm hiding, they can't see any part of my body. So like that's the begin. That is really where the year where you start to see the idea of perspective taking. And then it continues to develop in research through the age of about 10 or 12 years old. Like, and it goes through like being able to understand sarcasm. I said something and it's not true, but it's so not true that it's absurd so that it becomes funny, you know? You know, the idea of knowing when things happen, when plans change, knowing that if somebody was there or heard, you know, how much do they understand? And within the idea of theory of mind, there is like different levels. So there is like the first level, which is strict out, like if you hear me, you use your senses. If you saw it, if you know it, if you heard it, that's how you know about it. But if Shannon and I were, and Trevor were talking, and Trevor walked away, and Shannon and I changed our plans, if the person understands that second order of theory of mind, they would know that Trayvon wouldn't know about our change in plans. He would still think our plans are whatever he heard or was a part of at that time. So, you know, there's different levels, and you start to see it in people. And there is some research, like by the age of 12 or 13, if you've never had any teaching on theory of mind, through experience of life, you realize, wow, when mom's not in the room, I don't get in trouble for doing something that I wasn't supposed to do. So it does come for a lot of people with autism on that basic level. But really being able to understand theory of mind teaches you about, like, you can't lie well if you don't have theory of mind. But you also can't discriminate when somebody's teasing you for fun versus teasing you to be mean if you don't have a good perspective taking. You don't understand jokes or the difference between lying and a magic trick that's for fun. You know, a lot of our kids have these arguments in school, or they come home, they don't know whether something happened on accident or on purpose. So if a kid bumps into them in the hallway, if they don't have good perspective taking, they're thinking that person's trying to hurt them. So the intention, the idea of understanding intentions, that's the whole development of perspective taking that's out there. So if your person is starting to teach RFT at the age of 3, it's probably a good time, but just remind her that whatever skill you're teaching, you don't want the language level, the communication level needs to be at the same level. Because you start to have problems. One thing I learned early on, and this is just pure by trial and error, is I remember teaching senses to a child who didn't have maybe the social understanding of what senses were, and besides identifying. But when he started to figure out on his own, and our kids are so smart, they figured out, like, I don't see it, so I don't get in trouble for it. So we had kids start throwing away parents' keys because they didn't want to go out. And you couldn't reason why those keys were needed and the language involved. So I would just encourage that you don't want to teach past their age of development. You only want to teach what a 3 or 4-year-old is learning at that time. You don't want to go and try to teach something that's a lot higher level developmentally, not appropriate, because then it becomes, you know, there's a lot of understanding that doesn't happen. And if language isn't keeping up also, you start to get discrepancies in terms of, there's a lot of prompting that happens when a lot of our people will come in and they'll start teaching perspectives, or BCBAs will have come in and I'll look at the kid, and if their language level doesn't match, it ends up being the therapist prompting. A prompt dependency ends up coming, because then the therapist ends up being the one who constantly, the kid can only do it if the therapist asks the right question. So there's learning techniques that have to be there. But otherwise, you know, there is a whole, you know, RF team framework that is appropriate to a 3-year-old out there. It's just stay within that 3-year-old range, and it's a good thing.
Okay, very cool. This is an interesting question. By the way, we're saying hi to and we're saying hi to Debbie, and we're saying hi to Kirsten, and we're saying hi to Nasser. So feel free to write in, you guys, if you want us to say hi to you. So hi, Evelyn. I'm a CARD parent. Since here in California, obviously, we're not going back to school, has CARD looked into the homeschooling program? And I'm going to say, you know, I don't think it's a definite thing, depending on where you are in California. Here in Los Angeles, we're for 100% sure that we're not going back to school in the fall, but Orange County slugging it out. They're saying that they're going to go back into the classroom. I didn't watch what happened yesterday, but I don't think it's a one size fits all, but I love the question. A lot of people have been asking, is CARD going to offer a homeschooling program?
Okay, so CARD actually in Virginia is an academy. So we have all the ability to offer educational services. But the big question typically and sadly is, how does this relate to your funding source? Because if you have health insurance, they will treat medical necessity. They are not here for the academic. So we cannot use medical necessity funding for an educational program. Okay.
So you'd have to slug it out with your school. You'd have to get your school to pay for your card homeschool program, which people can do. I mean, people are trying all different kinds of things. We've had Bonnie on, and Bonnie has said, schedule an IEP meeting today, get it on the books today, and go in and ask them for the distance learning plan. And if it doesn't look ship shape, say, would you be willing to fund a different, because people are starting to sue school districts for special needs kids. So they might be willing, who knows? Bonnie is saying ask.
Yeah, and a lot of districts aren't, they just don't even have a plan for any of the special education students. And that's wrong overall. And there was actually an article that just came out, I didn't get to read it, but it's basically insisting that Congress pass IDEA, that schools have to support IDEA during this time where there's a lot of remote learning.
Well, and Betsy DeVos did say that there was no excuses, that they still needed to provide FAPE, that she wasn't going to give a pass on those things. She said a lot of other things too, but that she did say. So, you know, how people have started filing lawsuits. Now, you know, that's their right, and they have the right to do that. My thing is that by the time you get around to solving that lawsuit, your kid's going to be 5 grades from now, and I'd rather have my kid get the education today than fight with the school district for 5 years. So I'm with Bonnie. Ask if they'll do it. But first, you got to ask for the IEP meeting. You got to ask for the distance learning plan. And if it comes back thin or they don't have one, you got to say, this isn't appropriate. What are you willing to do to work with me on it?
Yeah, and I mean, people like LAUSD through COVID, the last few months, they actually approved all funding remotely. So all our paraprofessionals who had CARD as paraprofessionals, we were actually helping the kids with remote learning at home, you know, through remotely. So if they were on Zoom, there would be the picture of the teacher and our kid and our tech. So that they were helping the child stay on task, making sure they understood what the instructions were for the teacher. And there is a component there where a parent or a caregiver or someone has to be there to make sure the child stays on task. And that is the hardest factor. But the thing is, the families that really wanted it and were willing completely found ways to make it work. But there were issues like with internet and all sorts of other issues that came into play that made it difficult for families to access this. And then there were some families who just didn't have the means to be able to support the child at home. And we were given very clear orders by LAUSD that all the support we had given had to be remote. They did not want anybody going into the home.
Yeah.
For the safety of the staff, so.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all in this, you know, in this new place, and we're all in this new place together. Our circumstances are different, but each day we're finding out more information, and some intrepid parents are going in and saying, you know, here's what I want. And it's a very interesting, it's like the Wild West of education.
Definitely.
So there we go. Moving on. My almost 5-year-old stage 2 autism is refusing to go to bed. We are staying up till 1 a.m. for the last 2 weeks. We do not do sleep aids. How can I break the cycle? Sending you a hug, because this was my story, right? We were driving my son around in the car until 3 o'clock in the morning because we could not get him to sleep. What you got in your bag of tricks, Evelyn?
Oh, so many things to think about on this one, because I felt like almost every kid, I think when my life of autism started, I think every the first probably 20 kids I saw, all had sleep issues. You know, they'd stay up till 2 in the morning and then sleep like 12 hours and then be up again. And then it would get worse and worse. And then soon the whole cycle had reversed, where they're up all night, sleep all day, and just issues. Okay, so if you have a BCBA involved, they need to do a functional assessment to figure out why your child is staying up. But I'm going to give you some just general common issues. A lot of our kids that are staying home are not right now getting their energy out.
Their yayas. I say they got to get their yayas out.
Yeah, they just need to go and run and jump and whatever activity it is to tire them out. You know, I know adults like this who can't sleep because they're sitting all day working or whatever, but they just don't, they're just not getting that energy out. And so I'd say if your child's not getting that, figure out a way to do that, you know, whether it's going for a walk every day or letting them run, making them run. Because a lot of our kids do not like to run. So it requires somebody going outside and making them move and climb and do things, you know, the activity that was normally required when they were spending a school day out. So if you're not getting your yayas out, definitely your kid has to do that. The other thing is food-wise, you know, start experimenting with when are you feeding him last and what kind of food you're feeding him at, you know, for that dinner meal. And some of our kids get a lot of renewed energy the minute they eat. So if that's the case, then you want dinner to happen earlier and a snack not to come in. And because there are plenty of foods that actually just keep our children up, you know, and you never know what it is. And if that is the case, what I usually just tell families is start taking a food diary for a month, just or a couple of weeks, and writing everything and what time they ate and what time they went to sleep. And there are amazing correlations families find just by doing that. And that helps. The other thing is just like, is it, we can go pure behavioral now. What is the function of the behavior? A lot of times our kids don't go to sleep because maybe at night, that's the only time parents they get their attention fully on their child at that time. It's the only time if mom comes and lays with me in my bed, and it's the only time maybe all the other siblings are asleep, everybody else is awake, mom's tired, so they're going to stay with the child. And if the function of the behavior is attention in that form, then there is interventions that you can do, is providing the behavior at other times of the day, and then creating a sleep routine too is very helpful. You create a routine where you come in and maybe you read one book, or you set a visual timer so that they know that if you're going to stay with them for 10 minutes. And once those 10 minutes are done, they know to, you know, turn off the light, put the books away, and then you might leave the door open and then close it, or close it with a little opening. And it might mean you slowly moving out of the room. Sometimes it happens. There's just so many interventions. The other day we had a parent, and I gave her lots of kudos. She actually, what she did was she put, she was really tired, her and her husband, from working all day. So they put a blow up mattress in their room, and they started moving the blow up mattress down the hallway. And it eventually made it back to the child's room, and the child transferred to just sleeping on their own. And just sleep is really hard, especially because sleep deprivation for the parent is so exhausting in itself. So if you can get a behavior analyst to work with you on a plan that you can follow about how to create a sleep routine and how to, you know, move them to their own bed, or how to get them to their bed and stay in their bed, and giving them a reinforcer in the morning. If they do, reserving a certain type of reinforcer that if they went to bed by a certain time and stayed in bed, then they could have access to a reinforcer the next morning when they woke up. There's a lot of things that you can do. What worked for you, Shannon, with Penn?
Well, and I want to say she wrote in some more stuff. She said, we have jam-packed days. He wakes up at 100%. It doesn't matter what activities we do during the day. This is why I have a question. I've done everything. And I'm just sending you a hug, because that's exactly what I said when I came in, and I was like, you know, we've tried everything. It's just that sometimes we hadn't tried it all together. Like we would try one thing and then we would go to the next thing. So, and when we got ABA, there was a thing that the state of California said that you had to do a 16-hour class with your husband, and your child could not be there. And it was, and you couldn't get access to the ABA funding unless you did this 16-hour thing. Now, I don't know if all of you can relate to this, and I can hear people nodding their heads, but 16 hours with my husband without my child when he was 2.5 and had autism had not happened. Like, I didn't have a babysitter who could do that. Like, I hadn't been alone with my husband for 16, like that's crazy talk, right? but I lucked out. The universe, I had an old college friend who is so great with kids, who I trusted implicitly with my child and knew a little bit about autism. She came to visit. And so I was like, can I schedule this 16-hour thing? And it worked out. I sort of wish now that we made parents jump through some sort of fire hoop that was like that was educational, not the paperwork fire hoop that you guys have to go through now. But where you had to like learn a lot in the 16-hour things before you start. That's why I do the orientation at CARD, because I think it really helped us. And during that 16-hour intervention, they asked us to identify one thing that we would like to see change. And I said the sleep thing. So this young man who was teaching the class set up, you know, with adults, we call it that sleep hygiene that Ev was talking about. But it was, he laid it all out for me on a schedule so that I couldn't mess it up. And the first thing that had to go was that my child was not allowed to sleep during the day, because my child was taking a power nap. Like this kid would go out and we could literally hold him upside down and he wouldn't wake up. So the nap had to go, and that was hell on earth for me, because he was used to taking the nap and he would quirk off. If he had 1 second where he wasn't being engaged, he would go to sleep, and you couldn't get him back awake. So for like 3 or 4 days, we couldn't go anywhere, because if he got in the car, he would go to sleep. And my husband and I would tag team, and we would just keep him up. But then starting at like 5 o'clock in the evening, we were on a timed schedule where we would have dinner, then we would have the bath, then we would have story time, and then we would watch a very specific video, and then we would go to bed, and then each 10 minutes was marked off about what we would do and what we wouldn't do based on what he did. And it took 2 days, and he was asleep at 8 o'clock at night. And I was like, wait, how did that happen? I've done all those things before. I just hadn't done them all together on a schedule that was so defined that I couldn't mess it up, because I would always be like, well, you know, we're only going to read 3 stories tonight, or we don't need to do the video or whatever. You got to do the whole shebang. And the video was important. It was a video called Nighty Nights, and I don't think it's available anymore. But we transitioned, and I've told this to other parents, and they've used, there's a show that HBO did that was called Good Night Moon. It does the same thing. It shows kids, and they're talking about going to sleep and about the bedtime ritual, and it tells stories, and kids it like gets them in sleep mode like nothing else I've ever seen. So anyway, that's what we did, and it worked until we got messy with the sleep schedule again, and then we had to go back to it, right? But if you do it, it's just like what they say about dieting. If you do it and you stick to it, it works, right? It's not easy, but it works.
And what I always tell parents for anything that we're teaching is, if your child's been doing this for 2 years, it's not changing in 2 days usually. You're lucky that it changed like that, Shannon. But for a lot of families, if it's now a habit for your child, just think about how long it takes for habits to build for all of us as an adults. We have to give the patience and the persistence and the consistency to make it work. And it is hard, especially if you have other children. It's very, very hard to be consistent. It's like for me, for the first time in my life, since I've been a parent, I'm actually every night I'm actually being able to walk or just get some form of exercise, and I have to do it because my back hurts if I don't. and I have my little app that tells me how many days. There's no other time when I can go 38 days, and do this every night, because there's always some event to go to, just something going on in life that happens, and sleep does get disrupted that way. So this is actually a perfect time to do it, because you can't go out. There really isn't any outside, where you have to be somewhere. Or it might be, but it's not going to be as much as it is when, and it has been in the past in terms of events going on in your household where you can't sit down with your child and go through the routine and get them in bed at a specific time. This is actually a very good time to do it.
There you go. I love this question. Hi, ladies. My son is 6 years old and he is day and night potty trained since he was 4. I've been trying to get him to wipe himself after a BM and he just wants to poop and go wash his hands. I've tried video modeling, visual schedules with his pictures doing the steps and nothing.
For a lot of our kids, actually for typical kids, it's neurotypical kids have the same issue. They don't know why they have to wipe. And until they realize either it's stinky or messy or it doesn't feel good, like though the really concrete aspects is what convinces a typical child to wipe. It has to bother them in some way. And for our kids, they're not bothered by many of these things. So initially, I would say try to figure out like what actually bothers them and start there. But if your child is not bothered by any of this, and the fact that he was toilet trained early actually is a really good thing, because that means being wet probably did bother him. And so now with bowel movements, it's just not bothering him enough. So you have to put you can add a reinforcer in and say like, okay, if you wipe, this is what you get. And this is the only time you get it, is if you use the toilet, wipe and wash your hands, then you have access to it for a certain amount of time. And then it goes away again until that happens. But that means you're removing access to that highly desired item, no matter what. And the thing is, it can be like a certain program or video on an iPad, or it can be a game that only comes out, or a texture, whatever it may be. If you reserve a reinforcer just for those 3 items, and you can keep a little chart that shows them doing it and you can mark it, that is the most concrete way for a 6-year-old to understand. The other way is, and this is kind of gross, parents have told me it's gross, but it works.
I think that's what you're gonna say.
Challenge child is, if it's after a bowel movement, you treat it like a cause and effect game. You wipe and you look to see if anything's there. And you keep wiping till you can't see anything anymore. And when you don't see anything, that's what qualifies as stopping. And that alone put some kind of reasoning for kids of understanding the concrete cause and effect. Is I wipe, I look, and you just make it a routine. You basically keep wiping until you can't see. And it's worked for a lot of kids I've worked with. But it makes it concrete enough for the reason of why.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's hard to understand why. It's just like, when you teach washing hands to a lot of our kids, they don't know why they have to wash their hands because they can't see the germs.
Yeah. But I wonder, and I'm just going to throw this iron on the fire. I wonder if he knows how to proficiently wipe, because I think that sometimes kids don't know how to do it. And so it just seems like a ridiculous thing because it's not doing anything and they don't really know how to do it. But I'll tell you what else I wonder. I want to know if anybody out there has gotten that new thing that turns your toilet into a bidet that has the squirt stream. Because I wonder what that would be like for our kids, whether it would be traumatizing or whether they would be like, hey, this is fabulous. And it's a thing that you fit onto your toilet. I swear I'm going to order one at some point, but you fit it onto your toilet and hook it up to the water line, and it turns your toilet into a bidet and it shoots water at your bum. I wonder what our kids would think of that. I'm not sure that it would be a good thing. Do you know anybody who's used it, Ev?
No, I don't know anybody who used it. But on a side note, one of the things I actually have done with kids is we'll do the flushable wipes. We start with that because it just feels better.
Yeah.
And then
and it's more efficient.
Yeah, and it transitions them to the toilet paper. And a lot of them will wipe happily with the flushable wipe, but not with the toilet paper because it just doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Okay, I want to jump ahead because somebody wrote something in that is breaking my heart. From YouTube, my daughter-in-law sent me a heartbreaking text asking if I could search for any studies showing whether kids diagnosed with ASD at some time later in life show caring of other people. He is 4. Let me just tell you, you know, Ev's going to talk about studies and things. Yes, 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 yes. They care about other people. This idea that they don't care about other people is a lie. There are times when our kids will demonstrate and it looks like, oh, they have no empathy, but usually that's other things that are going on or they're not understanding context. But I'll let you hear from the expert. I just want you to know my kid cares deeply about other kids. And at 4, you couldn't have seen evidence of that.
Yeah, and I would say I think parents worry about this, and I always say, you know what, worry about teaching everything a 4-year-old should know first.
Yeah.
Because if you're missing any clues, like especially, let's say emotional or nonverbal cues of people, it's hard to show the empathy that we would want from our kids to show, but maybe more overt instances of behavior will, you know, have the kid understand more about what caring is. And you know what, earlier we talked about perspective taking. If your child's missing perspective taking, that's a whole huge, you have to understand that a person is hurting or not in a good place before you can demonstrate empathy. And a whole group of our kids do this automatically already. They do it, but there are a group of kids that come in and they don't have the perspective taking, so they don't demonstrate it. And just the fact, and so really working on all these other skills of interaction really help them understand how other people feel and, you know, what's going on. And some of our kids are very concrete. Maybe they only show care when there's crying, because there's like physical evidence, you know, of somebody not being happy. Or maybe they only understand the experiences they have. So if they saw somebody, you know, lose their favorite item and they've lost their favorite item, then they understand. But there is a way to teach it. They are really good. I mean, that intensive intervention early on with language and you know, teaching those cognitive skills, all of that really matters. You know, it's not that they don't care. It's just that they're not even picking up the cues that would indicate them and point them to the way of caring. And then I had a mom who was a rock star mom. She went through CARD, her kid finished at 8, and typical school, typical everything, graduated from college now, the whole deal. But I remember her calling me when she was 12, like tears of joy. And I was like, what's going on? And she was just, when he left at 8, he didn't care as much as mom wanted him to care. She really wanted him to care about a lot about people. And she was amazing. What she ended up doing was every month they went and they lived here in LA. She went and he had to serve food down in Skid Row. And she did every month they went down to Venice Beach, they went down and they passed out food, you know, and he could do all of it, but she just didn't feel like he cared. But at some point, she realized he cared a lot because he actually came home from something and said, you know what, I want to do a garage sale. I'm going to sell my video games and I'm going to give all the money to, you know, some organization for some cause that he really cared about. You know, it wasn't the cause that she originally chose, but then that's when she realized, oh, he does care, you know, but she took him down until she saw some kind of evidence. She just took him monthly for a couple of years. And, you know, even though he could give all the right vocal responses, she just never felt like he physically showed it enough. And that's what was her concern. And she did that for a couple of years. And at a certain point when that happened, she was like, oh, he does care. It's just that it came more from like his way of demonstrating it. And then also it was some cause or population that he really felt, you know, that he felt the need to support. And then she saw all the caring come out in that need. And we see that all the time for everybody. You know, we see that like some people are, you know, our advocates for ACT Today are amazing. You know, they will come and support, you know, autism, and they come from all different reasons why, you know, about why they're supporting autism. And then there's people who care about homelessness or, you know, just there's all these causes out there. They do. You can teach it, but this is where it goes back to he's 4. He should be having early intensive intervention, because you need all those other skills to be building alongside of it for it to really show in the way that
Yes.
that mom's going to want.
The thing that I would want to know is, you know, I would be asking your daughter-in-law, are you doing intensive ABA? Like, is she doing between 30 and 40 hours of ABA with this little customer? And, but what I hear is the fear, and I can relate to the fear, because when my child was 4, I wondered the same thing. But if she just needs to know that there's hope and that there's promise, you can write to me, s.penrod@autism-live, send me your phone number, and I will have my son call her, and she can talk to my son who was nonverbal, self-injurious, and showed no indication that he even knew that other people existed when he was 3. I'll be happy to put him on the phone with her, and she can see that, yes, in fact, and he'll, like, his friends at high school call him the doctor, because he's the one that they all run to when they're having a problem. And he talks it through with them. They absolutely care. So our mom about the toilet, and I said, what about the bidet thing? She said they would drink out of the toilet. We don't want that. Don't get this toilet squirter if you think your child will drink out of the toilet. Let's ixnay on that. Okay. And the parent who said her son does not like to wipe says he knows what the steps are to be done, but he doesn't want to do it. But Ev gave you a very good example of reinforcing it. I just want to say that, you know, while we're doing COVID, I'm trying to sharpen up my boys, my husband and my son, on some chores around the house, because at the beginning of COVID, guess who was in charge of all of the chores? Yeah. And I would assign it to them, and it kind of like would happen in a very halfway done, or it wouldn't happen. I forgot, whatever. And so I had to up the ante, because they were very clear with me. I don't really care about making the bed. We're not going anywhere. No one's coming over. I'm just going to get back into that bed in a couple of hours. Why am I making the bed? It didn't matter to them. These are, you know, my son's 17, my husband is 62, right? They don't care. They don't care. And I could say, well, then I'm just not going to teach this, but I do care. I feel like the house is better, and that we go to bed and have more restful sleep when we're getting into the bed when it's been made. I care. So I can't make them care, but I can pair something reinforcing with when they do it. So for my husband, I started praising him anytime he would make the bed, and he didn't make it the way I wanted it to. I still praised him. And then I would arrange the pillows the way I like them, but I would praise him for it and go, thank you. It means so much to me when you make the bed. For my son, I upped his allowance and checked off the box. Did you make your bed? You got paid? You didn't get paid. Because he only cares about money. He said to me, I don't understand why I'm making the bed, right? Your child is younger, but it's the same thing. Why does he care about wiping his butt? He's got to have a reinforcer for it. And Evelyn had said to you, you know, you put that 3 thing there on the wall that he has to go to the bathroom, he has to wipe himself, and he has to wash his hands, and he gets the reward, and it just gets all paired together. Eventually, you can pair that back, and he'll just do it, right, Ev?
Yeah, it turns into a habit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. My husband and son are making the bed without me doing anything now. It's a thing. And everybody has agreed, oh, I do kind of like it better when the bed is made. There we go. Okay. So, and our parent that has the child that's not going to sleep says, thank you, we're starting over tonight. Yep. And make sure you reinforce yourselves too, ladies. When you're doing this is hard stuff. Reinforce yourself. Okay. So the parent who did the wiping, she says, I would make him wipe until the paper. Oh no, this is another parent saying, I would make him wipe until the paper comes clean, but he does not feel like doing it. So there we go. Okay. Oh, the parent, the person who wrote in and said that, that they want to know about if they learn empathy. They said his home ABA stopped with the virus. So I would call your ABA provider and like, isn't everybody back doing ABA? Evelyn, card never stopped. So it is considered an essential service. So I would call your ABA provider and ask them, are they back up and running? And ask them to get back up and running. And if they don't, look into another ABA provider. You can't go this long without services, you guys.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, they're looking until 2021 if you're looking at all this, and your child can't go without services for that long. There are
Now,
some ABA
you say they're
agencies that
getting
haven't
virtual.
started. There's some ABA agencies that haven't done anything because they can't get staff to go. But this is where it goes to telehealth. You know, if you can do telehealth actually is helping a lot in so many ways that we didn't know.
Yes. Now they're saying he's getting a few of virtual hours, which I assume is telehealth. Make them up that. Make them up that. And CARD is sending therapists to the home. Ask your provider if they're doing it, or ask them to up the telehealth hours. Because what our kids need is intensity at that age, and that didn't change with COVID. And there are providers like CARD that are getting it done. It means a lot from the parents. I'm not going to candy coat that. It means commitment from you guys to be there and help and support and facilitate for your kid, but it's possible. People are doing it. Kids are making great progress on telehealth.
And CARD is being careful in the home, people going to home sessions. What we did was we limited it down to 1 or 2 people and kept it consistent, so that we were taking care of the safety factor of like how much exposure they had to how many people. So we did it, we knew that therapy had to continue. So initially we went down to only 1 person per child so that therapy could keep going. But as things have started to become more, you know, people have gotten used to all the PPE and everything else that's needed, that we have increased some of the teams to like 2 people so that we can still have some of the generalization aspect going.
Yeah. Somebody had written in about the empathy piece and said that there's an episode of Parenthood, which I vaguely remember, when the mom got cancer, and the way that they explained it to the son, who was played by Max Burkholder. And she said, I love the way they made Max Burkholder respond. You know, the Jason Katims was the executive producer on the Parenthood TV show, and he has a teenager, probably an adult now, that's on the spectrum. And so he worked very closely with Max. I've had the pleasure of meeting both of them, and had a very awkward moment at a Denim and Diamonds dinner where I said, I just want you to know that it meant so much to me at a time in my life. And they were like, okay. And they were very sweet about it, but I was like, I just, you know, to see them on TV, you know, and because what I remember from Parenthood was there was one scene, because it's the brother that has the kiddo on the spectrum is the one who takes care of everybody else in the family. And he's dealing with his kid being on the spectrum, and then his wife gets diagnosed with cancer, and his other siblings are still coming to him like, I need you to fix something for me. And man, I could relate to that. And at a certain point when he was like, hey, I think my plate is full. I think you should take care of that yourself. Because I don't know about everybody else. That was hard for me. And to see, you know, him do that, I was like, yeah, I got to tell people I can't take care of everything anymore. I have my own things to take care of. Parenthood, great show. Okay, I want to get to another question because we have a little bit more time. I have a family relative of 38 years old who may suffer from autism but has not been diagnosed yet. Can you please list out all of the signs and symptoms of the adult ASD and cover a talk of this topic? No small thing. That would normally take 3 hours, but you've got less than 9 minutes.
Okay, we've had actually many come through in the since insurance funding kicked in. I've actually helped with diagnoses for a 42-year-old chemistry professor.
Love it.
A 38-year-old IT guy. Recently, a 40-year-old PhD in mathematics. It's for me, it's so fun because I'm always asking, why now? It's obviously been functional. So what has happened? And it's been really interesting for a lot of them. It's been workplace. One of the workplaces had a dress code change, and the guy walked in and said, see the way I'm dressed? I have 5 pairs of these shoes, 10 pairs of these pants, 30 of these shirts, and that's all I wear. And when they changed the dress code, he couldn't handle it. And so human resources realized he had an issue that they could. So they sent him to see a counselor, and the counselor diagnosed him.
Wow.
And I asked him why, how, and he basically said his family saw him as just being probably more quirky.
Yeah.
But when he looked at the diagnosis, social communication, he didn't understand what rules, social rules. He could see that people were all behaving a certain way, but he couldn't figure it out. He offended people without knowing it all the time in all walks of his life. The social communication about like not knowing why he had to give eye contact when he talked. People not listening to him, or people saying that he was really rude or mean when he was giving his opinions, or just to him stating facts,
Right.
you know, calling people out when they lied because he didn't understand what a white lie was. So that's the social communication. And then usually there's a rigidity or repetitiveness that happens also, which is the other part of autism diagnosis, which is like the person that couldn't change his clothes, had his routine for what he wore, or only ate foods a certain way, or had a really hard time making decisions, even to what to eat. And usually it was came down to not understanding something that somebody had said about a food, about not knowing why something was bad sometimes and not bad at other times. So a grocery store shop, one of the women that I actually did an intake with, when COVID happened, you know, they rushed people in and out of grocery stores. And for her, normally grocery store shopping took a few hours because you had to read every single thing on a package and determine whether it was good for her or not. And when COVID happened, they were rushing her out and she couldn't. So she just started grabbing things off the shelves to go. And then she ended up at home with nothing she could eat because she had grabbed like all the wrong things, not knowing what's actually important in different type of situations. That saliency factor is often a really difficult part of determination of what to buy or what to, you know, do, or seeing a person who's crying but saying they're okay, and understanding that person is still hurting even though they're saying they're okay.
Yeah.
You know, conflicting messages and not being all of those things that, you know, to get a diagnosis of autism, there's a social communication part and then a rigid routine repetitiveness part that has to be there. And if you have enough in each section, that's what qualifies you for a diagnosis of autism. And, you know, for the different adults that I've seen, there is usually somebody in their life who basically communicates to them and says, you know what, you don't get this. Maybe you need to, you know, go get evaluated because you might have something. And for many of the adults, it's actually a relief. They were like, oh, that's why we've been different. Because even they're usually so intelligent that they know that they don't get things the same way other people get things, but they don't know what or how because it's not concrete enough for them to have. They needed somebody else to come in and say, hey, look, I see that you're having issues with this, this, and this. So maybe this is something that you want to go do just to check out and see, like, is this a factor in your life or is it not?
Yeah. I think Amy Schumer did a lot in the last year for the adult autism community. When she came out in her stand-up and started talking about the fact that her husband, that she recently married and then now they have a child, is on the autism spectrum, and that the things that she loves most about him are characteristics on the autism spectrum. I think it allowed a lot of people to look at it and go, okay, maybe this is worth looking at. Maybe it's not as stigma filled as I thought it was. I just personally want to thank her because what's funny is that since she did that, I have had almost every girlfriend that I have call me and say, do you think that my husband is on the autism spectrum? Because there are some things that are just difference between the sexes, right? That, like, you know, the fact that my husband and my son don't care. They're like, why does it matter if the beds are made? Does not make them on the spectrum. It makes them men. Right? And some women don't care about that too. I don't mean to be sexist about it. But my point is, I think that more people are asking the questions now and being willing to ask the questions because Amy made it okay. Amy said, this is kind of sexy, although there are some differences, and I think it made it okay. I have to be careful what I say here because there's a person in my extended family that I have now had because we've had so many people on the show that are adults who get diagnosed later on. And I'm constantly asking them, you know, what made you go for the diagnosis and did it help you? And the thing that they all say across the board is, oh my gosh, it helped me so much to know, because I was able to forgive myself for not knowing things that everybody thought that I should know. And it allowed me to pick and choose what I want to learn, and that I don't have to think of myself as being less than. That the one person who said to me, I felt like I got to meet myself for the first time with love, right? And so through all of that, of you know, hosting the show and having all these people on, I began to realize that there's somebody in my life who regularly struggles, and that seemed to, like, I never thought about before, but it's like, wow, they seem to fit that criteria. And had a discussion with them and said, I want to broach this. Have you ever thought about that? And they said, oh yeah, I've read up about a lot, but I don't see what benefit it would have. And have decided not to get diagnosed. And I think that that's a path too. But I do think that that person goes back and looks things up when they hit a wall, and they hit a wall regularly. So there we are. Oh, we've got a bunch of questions that came in last minute that I'm not going to get to. But you know what? Can we make a deal that our guest for tomorrow has canceled? And so tomorrow I would like to go through all the questions that we didn't get through today. Is that okay? We won't have Ev, but some of these questions are specifically for me. Are there any, yes, if you email me, somebody says, I asked a question before, I didn't get answered. Are there any resources that could be mailed to me? Email me, s.penrod@autism-live.com, and I'll be happy to answer your question. All right, Ev, thank you so much for being here. It's always such a pleasure to have you here. We appreciate you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's fun for me to be here. So.
Well, thrilled. And thank Viri Diana for always making you available to us. Oh,
I will.
She's a wonder. And I wonder what we would do without her, but let's not find out. Okay, so thank you guys. So again, tomorrow on the show, we're just going to have an answer session, and let's try to get through as many of these things and delegate them out where they need to be. But if you need something in the meantime, email me, s.penrod@autism-live.com. That's all the time we have for today, but we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug for me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I find it hilarious because, as you know, if you've been watching the show, you know that I have a dog now in the studio, a little dog that I inherited from Joanne Laura, and he recognizes the music now of the opening of the show, and he like barks and dances around while I'm doing the finger dance. I'm finding it very amusing. Just wanted to share with you. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from my home and from other locations around Southern California. So thrilled to be here with you on this Thursday morning. I just want to take that big, deep breath that we always talk about on Thursday, you know, taking that 3 deep breaths, right, to center ourselves and be here. I want to let you know that I'm here. There's Cheese. You can hear Cheese barking and saying hello to you too. He's the mascot now for Autism Live. Yes, Cheese, we heard you. Thank you. Anyway, I'm here in gratitude. It's such a privilege to be able to be here with all of you and to be on this journey. And when I say you, I'm always talking to the larger autism community. I know that we start always with individuals who are on the autism spectrum, but then we broaden our community out to include everyone who loves and cares about those individuals. And that's, you know, a wide variety of people. That's parents, that's teachers, that's husbands, that's boyfriends, wives, girlfriends, cousins, aunts, uncles, that's you know, ABA providers, that's speech and language pathologists, it's OTs, it's insurance providers. I mean, the list goes on. There's a whole bunch of people who care about individuals who are on the autism spectrum, and we are here to provide information, inspiration, and my favorite 4-letter word, which is hope, right? What a great word, hope, because with hope we can do all things. But I will tell you too that hope in action, and we have lots of information and experts that we like to have talk with you about what kind of action and what scientific proof there is to show that those actions can help us to get to the things that we're trying to get to. And we understand that everybody is an individual and everybody is not looking for the same thing. So it's not a one size fits all, right? But we're here. We always say, come on, let's all hold hands together. We get there together. Si se puede, right? Okay. So I do like to remind you that normally, especially on Thursdays, we're packed with experts, and we are getting back to our Ask an Autism Expert on Thursdays. But we had a late cancellation, and because I was coming back from vacation, you know, we weren't able to get on top of that and fill that. But we had so many questions that came in yesterday, and I said that we would at least address them. I know it sounds like I'm a hypocrite because I always start the show and I say I'm not an expert in the field of autism, and I'm not. That has not changed, but you know, I think I can help you to get to some resources and tell you what our experts have been saying over and over and over again. And when I can't, I'll say, you know, that's definitely, you need to go. A lot of times the answer is you need to go talk to a BCBA about that. But we'll get to that in just a minute. We want to remind you that there's lots of ways to interact, and we're really focusing today on you, the viewer, and what you want. So be writing in. I'm going to be trying to answering some questions from yesterday, but you know, want to hear from you guys. So how do you do that? If you're watching us live right now, then you're probably watching on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, or Twitter. And you can write into us, especially on Facebook and YouTube. You can be writing into us right now. You can also tweet at us, and we will take those questions. I also want to let you know that you can write into us on our homepage, autism-live.com. I'm having trouble accessing it this morning. What's new? So I probably wouldn't do that if you're watching us live. If you're watching us recorded later on, definitely, because we'll get that. We're working on it. We'll get that all fixed and up and running. But if you're watching us recorded or want to watch us recorded, I'm going to guess that you're watching us either on all of those places that I just said, because we replay on those places or the recording is there. But also you might be watching us on, or listening to us anyway, on things like Spotify, iHeartRadio, Deezer. We are also on iTunes. And I want to point out that for iTunes, you get to choose how you want the download. You can download the show with picture and sound, or you can download it with just sound. So you can take us on that hike that you're going on, or if you're going on a car drive to nowhere, as many of us are doing right now, because there's no place to go, but you need to get out of the house, yes, and see some different scenery. Take us on the car ride to nowhere. we are available to do that. It's a free download. So, and we are also getting ready to launch on a couple of more sites. We'll let you know more of that as that becomes available. But definitely watch us in whatever way you can. Hey, can I just put in a plug and say that it's important that to know that we don't spend money on advertising here. We don't spend any money on advertising. So the only way that other families find out about us is if you tell them. So please, whatever way that you can, I want to give you all the task of this week. Tell at least one other person about Autism Live and what you found here, and let them know how to find us. And you know, if you're like, Shannon, I just don't know anybody, I would tell, you know, share it on Facebook. Like us on Facebook if you feel comfortable about that. You can write us a review on iTunes. Man, that's like gold, because that lets lots of other people know about us if you do that. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube. You can subscribe on our homepage. All of those ways help us to get more information and inspiration and hope to more people around the world. So we appreciate all of you for participating in that. Okay, so moving on, we like to start the show on Thursday with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. And we didn't get a chance to do this on Tuesday because we wanted to show you, we're turning Tuesday into Temple Grandin Tuesday. And we're either going to show you recorded versions of Temple Grandin, or once a month, we're going to have Temple live with us. And then that'll go into the rotation of the shows you've already seen, because we love some Temple Grandin, don't we? But so we didn't have time for jargon on Tuesday. So we are going to show you count them, two jargon of the day today. So first up, by the way, we always have them sort of be theme grouped, or I try to be. So on Monday, we had SLP, which is a speech and language pathologist. So we're going to start today with the term OT. And, you know, when we do jargon, what we're trying to do is help you to understand these terms that people use as if everyone knows them, right? When you come into the autism community, whichever way you enter, thank you, Cheese. Cheese is getting a drink. Can you hear? Our mascot is loud today. But you come into the autism community, however you come in, as the boyfriend or the cousin or a teacher or the parent, right? And people start throwing these terms around as if everyone knows them. And it's crazy making stuff, right? So we try to give you, first of all, the actual definition, and I try whenever possible to make fun of those definitions, because that's really sometimes all they're good for. And then we give you a working definition and kind of talk about in context what the thing is, hoping that you at least have a beginning understanding of what it is. We're never hoping for you to have like the understanding where you could go take a test on it in that first moment, right? But you'll find that as you listen to the jargon terms more and you start seeing things in your life, eventually they start to click and you go, oh, that's what they were talking about. Okay. And when you do, you understand, because it's just so much easier to use the jargon. Today is a case in point. It used to drive me crazy. People would use this term, well, you're OT, I would go, what is an OT? Right? So let's take a look at what it actually is. And then you understand why, if you have to say this 300 times, you start saying OT. It's an occupational. And so if every time you say, well, my son's occupational therapist, I mean, first of all, it's one of those terms where you go, your 3-year-old has an occupational therapist. When the first time that they were saying to me, well, you know, we're going to get you OT and SLP, AP. And I went, stop. What are you saying? Right. And they were like, oh, well, your child's going to do occupational therapy with an occupational therapist. And I said, he wasn't even 3, he was 2.5. I was like, he's 2.5. He doesn't have a job. Why does he need an occupational therapist? Right. Like, I was like, no, he needs someone who can help him to speak. He doesn't have a job. He's not going to have a job for a long time. We're not wasting time on occupational therapy. But where autism is concerned, that is not what an occupational therapist does. long term. But let's take a look at now what our working definition is of an occupational therapist as it relates to autism. OT is a health professional whose goal is to help people achieve independence, meaning, and satisfaction in all aspects of their life. So now let's apply that to a 2.5-year-old with autism. A 2.5-year-old with autism needs to be able to pick up a crayon to color. And if they can't hold the crayon in their hand because they don't have the hand muscles for whatever reason and it's not satisfying to them, then they won't do it. And if they won't do that at 2.5, then at 4, they're not going to be able to pick up the crayon and write their name, which means that when they're 16, they're not going to be able to fill out the job application, which means when they're 33, they're going to be having trouble advocating for themselves, right? I took some big leaps there, but you see where I'm going with this, right? So for our little ones with, and I'm going to separate this into age categories, right? For our little ones with autism, you're going to see the school district usually here in the United States antes up an occupational therapist. And a lot of times what those folks will work on are in 3 separate little categories with our little ones. They'll work on fine motor, which is all those finger skills. They'll work on gross motor, which is but a very small amount of gross motor. Eventually that gets handed off to the adaptive physical education people, but they'll do some gross motor, like, you know, being able to walk and on a line, or, you know, walk up one stair 1 foot over the other instead of going 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot. They'll work on those kinds of things, and that is gross motor. And then the other category that's super cool, if you've got a good OT, is that they'll work on sensory things. So a lot of our kids have sensory processing, I'm going to say issues, where either they're overactive or underactive, but they're having trouble regulating sensory things. So there's a noise that they hear that they're not able, like right now I can hear that our recycling truck is out in the front yard and picking it up. But I'm able to, when I'm doing the show, to focus on the show and not attend to that. Because in my brain, I can dial that sound down, if you understand what I mean. It's loud and I can hear it, but I can sort of tell my brain, don't pay attention to that, right? For some of our kids on the autism spectrum, everything is turned up to 11. Everything. And so you're trying to talk to them and the garbage truck is at the same volume as you talking, and they can't modulate it for themselves. And that's a sensory issue. They can't process the hearing. But then how about the kids that, you know, they are seeking, like for whatever reason, they want to touch something. Their hands aren't good being without something in their hands. And so they're constantly touching stuff, or kids who are picking things up and tasting everything, right? So some of our kids are sensory seeking. Some of our kids are not noticing sensory stuff. And sometimes that's because there's so much that they've tuned it all out. If everything is at 11, sometimes you go, I'm not listening to anything, right? So it's not that they can't hear it and that they can't attend to it, but they've chosen to retreat into their own world just for comfort because it's all dialed to 11. So these are all things that a good OT can work on. And this is sort of spectacular. And the OT can help us to put our kids on a sensory diet, sometimes they say, where, you know, my kid needed pressure. So he would, you know, run into you. He would just like run up to you and run into you because he needed to feel that pressure and he didn't know how to get it. He would climb us like a tree because he would get on top of our heads. Because when he was on top of our heads, his legs were wrapped around our neck and he was, you know, pushing on our heads. And for whatever reason, that was pressure for him. So what we found and what our OT helped us to do is to realize that if we gave him pressure on a diet, a regular schedule, that he didn't need to climb us like we were a tree anymore. And so we would squeeze him and hug him and wrap him up like a burrito and squeeze him. And we wouldn't do it just with a blanket. Like our therapists would take our couch, never had the cushions on it. We had this big long chaise part of our couch, and they would take that cushion and wrap it over him and then, push down on it, and he would love it. And then he would be more productive for like the next hour. They could get more done because he wasn't seeking that, right? So, and then eventually our OTs taught us how to have him do that for himself. He would sit there and hold his elbows and squeeze his elbows so he could do that in second grade and not have to leave the classroom if he could regulate it for himself. So these are the kinds of things that a good OT can do. They'll help your child to be able to have the finger and hand skills to write. They'll help them to be able to eat, to be able to, hold the zipper, to bring the zipper up for the toilet training. Like there's a lot of things there. And also, anything that helps them to regulate so that they can do what their job of a 3-year-old is, which is to learn and to be able to learn. So they help to regulate all those things because they do have a job at 3, and it helps to build to the job later on. So never poo-poo the OT. The OT is a very serious and wonderful, wonderful thing. All OTs are not the same. And sometimes school OTs are very unimaginative sometimes. And they do a cookie cutter approach. I just want to open your world to the wonderful world of OT. And I always, whenever I talk about OT, I praise our dear friend, Kara Kaczynski. She is known as the Pocket OT. And you can go on her website, thepocketot.com. I think it's just pocketot.com. And she has some books that are super fabulous that give you like a 1-page thing of something you can do with your kid that will help them with all the things we just talked about. And she also has CDs that if your child is sound sensitive, that you can help gradually desensitize them to sounds. It's really remarkable. And if you see the kinds of stuff that she's doing, then you will know what kinds of things your OT should be doing. And you can ask and say, hey, what do you have in your wheelhouse? What do you have in your magic bag for the sensory stuff that we're seeing? And most of you, once your child is in the school system, and in the United States, they should be in at the age of 3, you should be getting free OT from your school district. Now, let's talk about the flip side of, I love me some OT. And I think what they do is vital and important to your child's program. Is it something that you can do and only do without ABA and get ginormous results with? And I'm here to tell you, you'll get some results, but if you do OT without ABA, you are missing the boat. And I know we have a lot of friends who are watching us in India and other countries, and I know that ABA is struggling in some countries to be there and to be viable, and it's expensive. I'm thinking of Saudi Arabia and a couple of other countries that you guys write from where you've got OTs. And I don't want to diss those OTs. They are filling a vital, important service, but you've got to get the ABA component on top of it. It's like, if I was thinking about this the other day and somebody said, well, I know you're not into the whole speech and OT thing because you're into the ABA thing. And I was like, that makes no sense whatsoever. That's like saying, I like dentists and I don't like orthodontists. That makes no sense whatsoever. They do different things. But if your child, is not able, if you're in the place where you're looking for a speech and language pathologist and an OT, then it tells me more than likely your child has an autism spectrum diagnosis if you're here and looking for those things, which means you need ABA too. And if you are going to do just the speech and language and the OT, then you're going to come back in 10 years and you're going to go, why didn't I not get where, people were talking that their kids got? And it's because you didn't do the OT. Or excuse me, you didn't do the ABA in conjunction with the OT. So I always advocate do it all, but if you have a choice and all you can do is one, I'm sorry, do the ABA. School will be there later on for you to do the OT, and you can do those things later on. I hate saying that because I'd rather you do them all. But if it's a choice and you can only do OT or ABA, hands down, I'm going to tell you my opinion, ABA. But I love the OT. All right. I don't want to be confusing. Okay. We're going to move on to jargon 2 of the day. You ready? So our jargon, which fits in very well with what we're talking about, is BCBA. I know it's alphabet land and you go, the what, the where, BCBA. And if you mangle this and you call it the BACB, it gets confusing because there are things that are other initials. But so try to learn this one because this is your lifeline. BCBA, and let's go on to our actual definition. A BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst. And let's not waste any time at all. Let's go on to our working definition so that you understand what these people are and who they are and what they do. A board certified behavior analyst is someone who is trained extensively in the application of the principles of ABA. I know, more letters. So remember that ABA is applied behavior analysis. It is the gold standard of treatment for autism. It is not solely an autism treatment. Here's where it gets confusing. ABA was around for a long time. It's a science. And then we discovered that ABA was effective in treating autism. The first study came out in 1987. Ivar Lovaas found that it was not only effective, it was wildly effective if you did enough of it often enough. Good quality ABA. This is what it has led to us having insurance cover ABA, is because it's effective. However, it's effective in different amounts, different prescriptions. I always like to remind you guys of that. So at a certain point, people started en masse doing ABA treatment with kiddos on the autism spectrum. And it was expensive because it takes a lot of time. And at a certain point, it became clear that there needed to be a designation of someone who was qualified to design the program. These people are the architects because it's so individual. The BCBA is somebody who looks at it at one individual. When we're talking about it for autism treatment, they look at one individual and they go, here's what this person needs to learn in order to have a fuller, richer life. And here is how we're going to teach it. Now, it's important to note that there are BCBAs who don't know anything about autism, that they didn't go to school for autism. Maybe they know a little bit, maybe they took one class, right? But that being a BCBA doesn't mean that you're an expert in autism, is what I want to say. So there is a board that regulates, and people have to take coursework, a certain amount of coursework, and then they have to graduate from that coursework, and then they have to sit for an exam where they have to prove their knowledge of ABA. That does not mean that they are experts in autism. So, but there is a list that the BACB, I think I got that right, keeps, BACBA, I don't know. Now I'm lost in alphabet land. That they keep a list of who are the people who have passed this test. And in order to be a BCBA and to hang out that license, you have to have passed the test, right? But I always say, so, and insurance won't pay for your treatment usually unless you have BCBA on your case. They want to make sure that there's an expert there. But it's your job as a parent or as a teacher or whoever is the person to know, is this a person who's experienced with autism and experience with the type of autism that your child has? I will say, you know, I love me some BCBAs. Can I just say how much I love me some BCBAs? Because I think these people are the people who change the world. But they're not all created equal. I love to go to BCBA events and meet all the BCBAs. A lot of them love jargon and graphs. I've learned that about them. But they're really wonderful people. And the ones who are involved in autism care deeply. The ones that I've met care deeply about our kiddos. But there are no better BCBAs, I'm just going to say this, than my homeschool here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. That the camaraderie and the hive mind of CARD is the largest employer of BCBAs, I believe, in the world. And to have a group of people working together on autism ups the game. That if one BCBA is working with a child and they see something, they're like, that is outside my experience. Because let's face it, kids are different. All they have a weekly hive mind session where they get together and they go, okay, has anybody seen this? Or they can email other BCBAs and say, have you seen this before? And the hive mind responds, and it's amazing what happens. It just gives me goosies, you guys. It's absolutely amazing. So I love me some BCBAs. I love it when BCBAs are, there are a lot of BCBAs that work in the corporate field. Can I just say, because you're like, well, if they're not working with autism, what are they doing? They work in the corporate field, or they work with Olympic athletes, or they're in a lot of places making a lot of people's lives better. That's what they do. And I won't say that I don't love those people too, but I don't know those people. So I see them occasionally at conferences and I'm like, you're interesting. You do BCBA and it's not with autism. That's funny. And they think I'm like odd for thinking that. That's okay. But I love my BCBAs that deal with autism because they are the architects that make the plan that gets our kids there. Fabulous, 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 fabulous. Okay, moving on. We had a question of the day for you today, so I guess we're going to go ahead and do. Sorry, I didn't see what the question was, and it all went away. It doesn't matter. We're still on the topic of the day. I want to see what we're saying. So in India, OT is expensive and not free. We have to train parents. We focus more on parent training, and that is super and fabulous because I think parent training is the center of everything everywhere. I do not like that here in the United States with insurance, that it made it possible for some parents to think, oh, I just have to drop my child off for the center. That ain't it, kid. That ain't it. That is not what it's going to get it done. So that's why I was trying to be careful about saying that, I love that right now there is such great OT in India specifically. And we've had people on the show to talk about the great OT that is happening in India. And I love that you're doing the parent training there. I just want there to be more ABA there. I'm just going to be honest about that. Okay, thanks a lot for the knowledge and expertise which you are sharing on this platform. I'm new here. I'm a clinical psychologist from India. Well, I am so glad that you are here. And what an interesting day to join us when I brought India up. So, okay. Yeah, no, you're right, Traven. I did want to move on. So it's all right. In FBI, and I want to know, did you mean to write in FBA, or what did you, the director, oh, I see what you meant. The director of my old job worked for the FBI as a BCBA. Thank you. Yes, BCBAs work in places in the government too for the FBI. That's so funny because when there's a jargon term FBA, a functional behavior assessment, and I would always call it the FBI, and they would always make fun of me. Okay, so what I want to do now is switch over to answering questions, some of which we had yesterday. And then I want to start with the poor person who yesterday was like, I asked my question and it did not get asked. And their question was, any tips on getting my 9-year-old to go to the bathroom himself? He will only go when someone takes him or a timer goes off. And, I just want to send you some love and say that it's all relative, right? We all talk about, we all want to arrive, right? We all want to get to the point where we're at the place where it feels normal, right? And that's super duper hard. I want to remind that parent that there was a time when you were like, oh, I wish that my child would go to the bathroom at all. So right now he's going when there's a timer or when somebody points to him. So that's a prompt. And whenever we have a prompt, we never want somebody to become prompt dependent, right? So what we start to do is something called fading the prompt. And so we want the prompt to be less obtrusive. So if you think about it, in the beginning, when the timer went off, you were probably having to physically take him to the bathroom, and you were verbally taking him to the bathroom, and maybe you held up a sign that said, we're going to the bathroom, right? So now it's just a matter of taking the prompts that you have and minimizing them. So I don't know what all you're doing right now for the going to the bathroom, but you want to keep the prompt there, right? Otherwise you're going to have accidents. And we want to keep them getting to the reinforcer, right? But we're just going to make the prompt less and less and less. So it could be, if you're just going off the timer, it could be that the timer gets less and less quiet, you know, or more and more quiet, I'm trying to say. It could be that you move to one of the timers that it just flashes a light so that there's no noise. And then we have the light get less and less and less. It could be that you have a little bathroom icon that you hold up and go, it's bathroom. Right. I would also, I don't know at what point you are in things, but when the timer goes off, are you saying it's time to go to the bathroom? Or when the timer goes off, do you go, what do we do? I don't know. What should we do? And have him take you to the bathroom. Right. So it's just a matter of moving it slowly, and it's got to be so slow. And I know that you're like, oh, my child is 9 and I just want him to go to the bathroom on his own. But slow and steady, I guarantee you that by the time, you know, he's 14, this is going to be a distant memory. This too shall pass, but go slow, 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 and just take whatever it is and make it smaller and smaller and smaller. So if the thing is that you're holding up an icon that says it's bathroom time, you know, and what you do right now is you hold it up and you go, you know, and point to it, right? So then you would just, you know, hold it up and hold it not as far as I'm showing you things on my phone. You would hold it up and hold it not as far up, right? And not point to it and see, does that get it done? And if it does, great. And so then we hold it up just a little bit more. And then we get to the point where we just reach for the icon, and they know and they go. The trick is you got to be reinforcing it. Reinforce, 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 reinforce. And so that eventually, you know, it's just your hand reaching for the icon, and they go to the bathroom and you reinforce. If you ever get to a point where something doesn't work as you're minimizing it, then you go back to the last thing that worked, right? So whatever is working to prompt him, make it less, or switch to a prompt that's less obtrusive, right? And reinforce, reinforce, reinforce that he's doing that. I hope they're here with us today, and I hope that makes sense. Please be writing in, you guys, if you have a question. I'm going to keep answering the questions from yesterday. Okay, scrolling down here. I want to know, for the parent who was here yesterday when we were talking about the going to the bathroom, how it worked. I gotta find my spot here. Okay, so the question yesterday, because we were talking about telehealth, and again this morning we were talking about it. What if we're high risk? What's your recommendation if my son's ABA was in center? Telehealth isn't an option with ABA for my son. I had a few parents mention their RBT tested positive for COVID, so I'm scared. Okay, so that is a great question. And I'm going to tell you that we want to get into a space where we go, there are going to be problems and we're going to solve them no matter what. So here's the thing. Your kids need ABA. They just need ABA, and they need ABA 24/7. And we know that there are people all around the world who did not have ABA and still don't have ABA, right? And have those people been able to solve the problem for themselves? Yes. And what they did was they trained themselves and they did it themselves. Now, I'm concerned about your saying ABA via telehealth is not the solution for my kiddo. And I want to know more about that. Why is that? Is that because you are working and you're not able to facilitate? Is that because the perception is that they will not stay near the computer. What is the perception for that? Because I want to make it clear. Obviously, there's many different kinds of telehealth that different ABA providers are doing, but I've spent quite a bit of time with our staff at CARD seeing how they do telehealth, and it is cutting edge. And because they have all kinds of things to keep the kiddo interested. And for the parents who are afraid, I want to make sure that you realize when this is done right, you're not having to do anything but facilitate. You don't have to come up with the lesson plans. You only have to do what the person on the screen tells you to do. So if I'm, the child is here, I'm going to have my lotion be the child, and I'm the parent, and I'm the person is on the computer screen, and they are talking to my child, and they say, okay, now we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And they're going to say, touch the red one on the screen. And they're going to say to you, can you pick up his hand and touch the red one and now give him tickles? They're going to tell you exactly what to do. You don't have to be the genius. You don't have to figure it out. But for some of our, especially our little kids or our kids who need more support, the parent does have to be there and be the facilitator, but you don't have to be a genius. You will find that you will learn and you will become a genius. But that is how they are. So the parent becomes the facilitator, not the therapist, and not the BCBA. I just want to make sure that people know that, because I think there were a lot of people who said my child is not going to be able to do telehealth. And then they discovered that their child could do telehealth. And if you are at high risk, I support you in your right to stay home and to just be home. But we got to get long-term strategy specific here. And I think you either have to learn this yourself or you got to create a pod. And we're going to be hearing more about this in the coming days about how people create a pod. So, you could talk to your ABA provider and say, I want to create a pod with a therapist. Would and talk to them, be frank with them about how you want to do that. A CARD, they did this in some respects, that it's just one therapist going to one family. And families had frank conversations with the therapist and said, here's how we're social distancing. How are you social distancing? And when those two things met and went well, you have a pod. It's a social agreement that this is how we social distance. Now, does it mean that no one can ever have anything bad happen? No, but you got to figure out what your risk level you're willing to take, and you can't sacrifice the ABA. We've had many parents that through this have gone through and taken the RBT courses so that they will know how to do it. And we have parents who are training family members to be able to do this. It's all hands on deck, whatever it takes. Who's in your pod? Is there anybody else living in your house that you can train? Because we got to keep this moving in the right direction. Thanks a lot for the knowledge. Okay. Nope, I don't have. Okay. I thought somebody had written something new in. Okay. Does that help? Because you just got to get into the mindset. We've talked before on the show about that Life's little instruction booklet where it said, if you're going after Moby Dick, you got to pack the tartar sauce. And you've got to convince yourself there is a way. And I promise you there is a way, because for the last 20 years, parents were figuring it out before insurance was paying for ABA. They were doing it in their homes by themselves. They were having church volunteers. Do you have a family member who you trust that you can, I'm thinking extreme circumstances, that you can put them up in a hotel or put them up in a back bedroom for 14 days, isolate from them so you know that they don't have COVID, and then train them, put them in your back bedroom and have them do the RBT and have them, work with your kiddos with you. It's time to get solution specific. But parents can do this. Parents are doing this. It's overwhelming, but it's doable. And if you want to do it, I'm certainly here to help you to figure out how. I don't know why I can't get the questions to come back up no matter what I do, Traven. They don't like me. It's because they're already up. That's why I just had them move down. Okay, moving on. My son is almost 4 and not getting service at this time. He was going to public school and they just announced they will be doing digital. Do you think digital is enough therapy for him? No, I don't. A 4-year-old, whether I'm talking about digital school is not enough. No, a 4-year-old who is on the autism spectrum, I'm just looking at the answer that that parent just wrote to me. A 4-year-old who's on the autism spectrum needs an intensive ABA program. And that often means, depending on the individual child, where their skill level is, right? Some kids, it's appropriate for them to go to school at 4, others it isn't. The reason for going to school is for socialization. That's the only good reason to send a 4-year-old to school and not have them just focus on ABA. And since you're not going to get that anyway, I would say at 4, hunker down and do as much ABA as you can get everybody to do and learn it yourself so that you can do it as well. And, you know, ask them for the distance learning, because maybe it'll be a break in your kid's day, but I would not waste your child 8 hours of your child's day to do distance learning with school. I would much prefer that you do distance learning, one-on-one telehealth with an ABA provider that does quality ABA. Now, this goes back to the answer that the parent just wrote for the other question, which was, it's more that the provider is not willing to do telehealth. I would ask you to go back and ask them now, because a lot of ABA providers in the beginning of COVID freaked out and said, you know, we have to close and we can't do telehealth. We can't do telehealth. We don't know how to do telehealth. We don't know what we're doing. CARD was about 7 steps ahead, because CARD has been doing telehealth for years. Because when people found out what CARD was doing, they wrote to CARD and said, you know, I live in Jakarta. How am I going to get what you have here? And so CARD did telehealth with families in Jakarta. So CARD was that much further ahead, but they weren't the only ABA provider that was ahead. Since COVID, there have been a group of people who have published about how to do ABA via telehealth. So even if your ABA provider was one of those providers that had never had experience doing that, the information is there for them now. And from a standpoint of self-preservation, I'm going to guess they're willing to do it now. So check back with them. And if they say they're still not willing to do it, I just have to lovingly say to you, it's time to jump ship, because this isn't working. This is that Band-Aid we were talking about at the start of the show. Any ABA provider who thinks it's okay for your child to go 5 months without services and still isn't making an effort to find a way to accommodate your needs, I don't know what they're doing. I don't mean to be mean, but you know, it's like you got to wake up and sniff the coffee if you're an ABA provider, and figure out, you know, if your job is to help these kids, there's more than one way to do things. Yes, is there a better way? Can we all agree that someday when it's all safe, and let it be soon, please, when it's all safe, yes, it's better. It's better if you've got somebody one-to-one right there in the same space working with your child. Of course, that is better. But is it better to have nothing? Telehealth studies are pouring in showing it's effective. So, you know, much more effective than doing nothing. So much more effective than doing nothing. And in the beginning, a lot of people were saying, well, maybe it'll just be a placeholder and keep kids from regressing. Okay, well, that's been proven that that's been done. But I'm telling you that I have seen and heard of kids who are making tremendous progress. Not little progress, tremendous progress. So fight with your ABA provider nicely. Call them and say, hey, are you doing this? If you need to see those studies, write to me so I can hook you up with the studies that they're doing, the things that they've been publishing about telehealth for ABA, so that you can take it back to your ABA provider. But if you're at the point where you're having to talk them into something that is considered an industry standard right now, I would start looking at another ABA provider. I don't mean to be mean about that, but I would. Okay, back to the questions. Sorry. Good heavens, it's like I don't know how to work my own computer. Uh, I can't get the thing to do what I want it to do. It's so frustrating. Where, oh, where? Okay, here we go. All right, no, I think I'm at the bottom of those questions, and we've got just a couple of minutes left. So Traven, do I have any questions left on Facebook? Here we go. I cannot allow anyone in my home. I know I can facilitate it because I am an RBT, but I didn't want to go to a new provider. I understand that, but then I would massage them. I would massage them and say, hey, how about if I'm your guinea pig and let's do telehealth with my kid. You know, I can facilitate it because I'm an RBT, and come on. And then, let me be your guinea pig and let's do this. And ask for the therapist that you want, because clearly the reason why you don't want to switch providers is there's somebody there that you like working with and that's helping your kiddos. So ask for that provider and say, let's do this together. Like, that's what I mean by getting in that mindset of we're going to solve this no matter what. And say to them, that the insurance companies, well, here's the other thing. Is your provider, is your insurance still allowing for telehealth? Because a few people were allowing it for a short period of time and then stopped. Is your funding source still paying for telehealth? Because if they are, it should be an easy sell to your provider to say to them, I will work with you on this. Give me the therapist. Let's go. And say to them, give me 40 hours and come on, let's do this together. If your funding source won't pay for telehealth, then there's another step in there where you need to lobby your funding source and say to them, I need an exception to the rule. I have extenuating circumstances. And my child, you need to be able to provide my child this service. Other people are doing it, and lobby your funding source. I'm assuming that your funding source is paying for it. Then I would call up the ABA provider that you love and say to them, come on, let's go on this walk together. You'll be helping them. They need to stay in business, and they're turning down a whole other avenue of helping their kids right now. And none of us think that this is going to be over anytime soon. So I would, and because you're already an RBT, you can facilitate it. You're going to be spectacular. So that's what I would do. All right, let's talk a little bit about tomorrow. Tomorrow we have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Alsbaugh-Jackson will be with me, and our fabulous guest is Kathy Gott. Kathy is one of those veterans from the autism community who has been pivotal in so many things. She was instrumental in starting Danny's Farm. She was instrumental in starting and being involved in some of the really good quality group home situations that are available in Los Angeles. And she is working on a new project that's called The Village, which I think is going to blow everybody's mind. And she's going to be with us tomorrow to talk about that. I want to talk about a couple of things that we've got coming up. A week from today, we are going to be welcoming Evelyn Gould back to Autism Live. She was a regular many years ago. She's now Dr. Evelyn Gould. She left on her merry way to go become a doctor and to become more well-versed in ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. And it's a really cutting edge thing that is being used in the autism community for both individuals on the spectrum and their parents to help them with stress and to achieve the things that they want to achieve in their lives in a healthier way. So we're excited to welcome her back to the show tomorrow during next Thursday during our Ask an Autism Expert segment. And then on Friday, and I just want to put this on your radar, because once a month, we have our research experts join us to talk about some research. And so we have asked them to come in to talk to us about distance learning for special needs kids. What the research says, what works, what doesn't work. And we're clearing the decks for that day. I can't wait to hear, because a lot of us are in this boat this year. So that is happening next Friday. So I just wanted to put that on everybody's agenda. All right. I just adore all of you, and I appreciate you being here and appreciate you being patient, because I know that sometimes we don't get to everything, but I'm glad that you are here, and welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. We're back tomorrow, same time, same bat channel, and again, talking with Kathy Gott about this new way of looking at things, the village. You're going to be really excited to hear about it, and Nancy will be here, and we will probably cover some news as well. So that's all happening tomorrow. And always, don't forget, like our shows, like us on Facebook, subscribe for the newsletter so that you know what's coming up. We're about to update that. If you had given us your email and you're like, I'm not getting the newsletter, that's about to change. And we appreciate your patience. We've been running on a skeleton crew around here. But anyway, we're out of time. I adore you all. I will be back with you tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. How are you, Shannon?
I'm so thrilled to be here with you two beautiful ladies, but I'm kind of stunned by the beauty. Both of you look fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. You look fantastic too.
As do you, Nancy. We're reflecting back on you, Shannon.
There, well, I mean, those earrings, Vena.
And that headdress.
I know, it's just all stunning. So I guess we should all introduce ourselves. I'm Shannon Penrod.
I'm Nancy Allspaw Jackson.
Vena Tiero.
And we're thrilled to have Vena here this morning because as we were going through our news stories for today, we realized, oh, we have somebody that's the living, breathing embodiment of part of what we're talking about in one of the news stories. And on a very last minute notice, Nancy reached out to Vena and she said, yes, I'm going to be there. So I don't know, like Vena, I sort of want you to open this topic up and talk about what you've been going through and what it's been like for you. What's going on?
Well, we, in 2015 made the hard choice to put our son in a group home. And that's tough enough as it is. And we decide to, do what's best for the family at large. And so I visit him once a week, sometimes more when my schedule permits. And as soon as the pandemic hit, we just hunkered in and imagined, we were told initially, 6 weeks?
Yeah.
And, mentally you figure, oh, I could do that 6 weeks. Zoom became our friend. And I, rationalized that I'm seeing him perhaps a little bit more, 2 or 3 times via video chat. But it's difficult for our children on the spectrum because they're also going to school on a screen. So the group home informed me that he tenses up every time they open the laptop. He's got school, he's got different classes, he's got therapies, his speech and his OT, all on Zoom. And then when mom comes in, I'm hoping to get this jolly guy. I don't always get the jolly guy, but we still put our time in. But time has flown by.
Yeah.
First, it was the 6 weeks, then it was another 4 weeks. Well, right now we are coming up on 4 months without any human touch. It's very difficult.
Very
And it-
difficult, Dana.
And difficult for everybody. I mean, it's
Right.
difficult for you, it's difficult for him. I'm sure it's difficult for the people that are running the facility that he is in. It's difficult for your other son, who I'm sure would like to see his brother.
Yeah.
And so you have been asking all of us what can be done about this. And I know you've been out there working it really hard. You're a wonderful advocate. We came across a story that we wanted to cover today. Nancy, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the story is out of Florida, and it's basically that the parents of an autistic son begged Florida Governor DeSantis to lift coronavirus mandate barring visitors in group homes. This is essentially the same thing that Dana is asking to have done. Of course, they understand, these parents of this particular child, Jan and Greg Cawley, who are the parents of Billy Cawley, are saying that they understand the need for caution to protect elderly residents in homes, but this is very different when you have a child with a disability that isn't sick and the parents aren't sick, and they've been now 4 months dealing with this. So they're asking Governor DeSantis to lift the ban restricting access to visitors. And this is essentially the same thing Dana is requesting, right, Dana?
Well, I'm not requesting a lift of the ban. I understand the protection of the group home. I do not believe that anyone should enter the home, a group home that is responsible for the safety and well-being of multiple clients. I do not feel we should, consider that an option. What I'm asking for, I've had some time to think on it, are what I'm calling well family visits. And there are regional centers all over California with conference rooms, multiple conference rooms. I'm a person who's working, blessed to have a job. Our job sanitizes the areas. They have spraying. We have major protocol in terms of masks. We take actual screenings daily before we come to work. I don't know if you guys are still in your home, but because I work in the media, we have to go to a facility. It's minimal staff. Everybody is respectful. Everybody, even in the break room, we stand far apart. We're masked. We walk in grabbing Clorox wipes, cleaning keyboards, our mouse, door handles, pens. So we're very mindful. I'm asking that some provision be made where the group home can bring their client, our child, to a facility that's already sanitized, and we can come as well and schedule these visits from 1 to 1:55. It's our turn. They sanitize the room at 3 o'clock. It's another family's turn. Well, family visits in environments that are sanitized with protocol preceding these visits. What does the state want to do or ask us to adhere to in order for them to feel comfortable? And I've spoken with Ed White and Tony White, who run the group home where my son Bakari resides. And we've had very emotional talks, not against one another, with one another, because they understand. And it's brought me to tears on many occasions, and they admitted that it's brought them to tears. They're compassionate people as well. They didn't start a group home to keep children away from parents. They understood the need of 24-hour care and knew how to provide it in a wonderful way and allow families to visit. The door has always been open all week long for us. And so to see their clients, people who they care about deeply, not be able to be with their families is very tough on them.
I'm sure it is, Dana. Let me ask you, have you seen in your Zoom visits with Bakari, have you seen any regression because of the lack of contact with you and maybe confusion over this situation?
I couldn't define it for those terms. He's had behaviors during all these weeks twice on camera.
Okay, on camera.
So that's you guys know that's a great ratio.
Right.
So, and one time I do believe he reacted to the fact that I'm just tired, I can't see you. It felt that way because with non-speakers, you know, he's learned to be able to point to letterboards. He can't do that through a screen. He hadn't grown to that that level of competency for himself. But prior to all of that, and I've talked to other moms of non-speakers, we use telepathy. I mean, we have friends and family members that we grow close to enough that we can tell what they want because we've been around them, and common sense gives us the answer and they confirm it. And so I believe maybe one of those times he was upset because he was just tired of these Zoom calls and he wanted to see me.
Right.
So Vena, this family has gone directly to the governor of their state. And I know you're such an on it mom. And I don't know, it was a couple of weeks ago that you wrote to a bunch of us and said, okay, hive mind ladies, who do we know?
Yeah.
I need some help here.
Yes.
How have things progressed? Because I know we all are feeling for you. And we all want to hear the solution. But nobody had anything for you, at least on my end. I didn't have anything. What have you found out so far? Are you getting any traction? Who were you talking to?
I got a little bit of information from the West Side Regional Center, who has African-American / Black family support group and run by Beverly Hutchinson. And
I know Beverly.
Yes. So they were able to follow up with how West Side Regional Center handles it. And they allow families to drive into the driveway and the child be able to come out and speak with the parent. Now, I forwarded that to Northside Regional Center, to our supervisor, and I'm still, following up on that, hoping that maybe that's an option, but that's not really one that Northside is even open to based on the lack of response. So other
would that fit the bill for you if you were able to drive into the parking lot of the home and stay in your car and have him come out and talk to you while you're in the car? Would that be enough for you, or are you wanting more than that?
Oh, I definitely want more, although something,
better than nothing.
This is the nature of where we are. When you're denied so much, of course you'll take a crumb. Now, will that crumb be productive? Will my son be comfortable just seeing me in a car and not be able to get in the car like he always does?
Right.
Will that cause a tantrum?
Yeah, it's a good point, Vena. It's a really good point.
I want to circle back to Nancy asking about regression.
Yeah.
Forgive me, ladies. I have seen regression in terms of language. He was becoming much more verbal, constantly saying hello all the time. Hi, Mom. If I asked him a yes or no question, always he had a verbal yes or no. And quite a bit of echolalia. Now there's 0.
Okay.
Okay. One of our viewers has said that their group home lets parents visit on the porch with social distancing.
And what regional center are they with?
I don't know. I don't even know that they're in the state of California. If that viewer wants to write back in and tell us. But I think that there's a lot of different ideas that are out there of how it, like, you know, I love your idea of having people, you know, meet in a place that's designed for that, but it will involve a bunch of cleaning. And I could just hear people talking about budget. What I love about if there's a picnic table outside the home where parents could come and with social distancing, then you're outside where we know the transmission possibilities are less and it doesn't necessarily need to be cleaned in the way that you would have to clean a room. Would that work for you, Vena?
That would be awesome. Although then you're dealing with the natural occurrence of events, which means, will my son sit at that picnic table? He's gonna go wherever he wants. So then, you know, but I'm open to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I strongly support group homes who are not opening themselves up to visits. I applaud Ed and Tony White for how they've, you know, led by example, following the rules, and even when it hurts them, adhering to protocol that they've been given. Because, you know, many families have taken their children out of group homes, and many group homes have fallen. Just like at the beginning of the pandemic, many people were they lost jobs. Well, when you lose a job, you lose livelihood. Well, families wanted to be with their children. Fear set in. They took their children out of group homes because they were home. Yeah. And these group homes lost their funding. So it's a double-edged sword.
It is. I have to say that I can count 5 different families that I'm aware of right now that have kiddos in group homes where the kiddos have been exposed to and now are diagnosed with COVID.
Really?
Oh,
yes.
Shocking.
Five specific different families where that is the case. And fortunately, everyone is doing okay. And, you know, there's been no loss of life. But for me, like, I know what you're going through. Like, that's not what I want to say. I can't imagine what you're going through, Vena. But at the core of it, I appreciate you saying how great it was that they kept those protocols because your child continues to be healthy. I can't imagine what it's like to have your child in a group home and then get the phone call that your child has COVID and be told you can't visit your child and your child is sick. And at least in 2 cases, the children have had to be moved to the hospital. No. And they can't visit there. And that, to me, I would lose my mind. You'd have to sit on my chest. I couldn't handle it.
Yes, I agree.
And we don't want that. So, you know, I appreciate that you are measured in your requests, Vena, and that you are appreciative of the guidelines for the reason why they're there, but that you're wanting to have it progress because it's also to his detriment for him to not see you. I so appreciate that.
Yeah. And so we have the park option, and it doesn't cost much to sanitize one room. It really.
Oh, I know. It's especially when you know that's what they'll say.
Especially when you consider many of the employees of these organizations where we're asking to do this have not been paid. Everybody's not being paid. So money's being saved someplace, and testing is becoming more readily available. That's another option to put in place. Couldn't regional center funding come down for everyone to be tested more regularly?
And I think these are good points. I think you need to get to the governor with it. I think that's what this family did. And
I want to know who can provide an introduction. I mean, I'd actually enjoy a sit down with Mayor Garcetti and his team. I'd love to be able to visit. They have daily press conferences, they have updates, and I don't hear them talking about our situation. I don't know how we let them know
Well, this is one way. We put it out there and let people know that you're looking for solutions, and that it isn't just you. There are families in all around the world that are looking for solutions to this. And state by state, I think we got to start coming up. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. But Bana, thank you so much for being
Thank
such a
you,
wonderful
Bana.
advocate for
Thank
your
you
sons and for taking the
making
time
this
to be with
point
us.
more known.
And if anybody has any ideas for Bana, please get in touch with us at the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much for being with us,
Thanks,
Bana.
Bana.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Onward and upward, and this
That
too
is-
shall pass.
That's right. That's
You're so
right.
positive.
From
I
your
love
mouth
it.
to God's ear. Okay, so we
have a special guest today.
do, and I'd love it if you would introduce her, Nancy.
Okay, well, I've got quite a bio here. Kathy Gott has devoted her professional life to finding solutions for special
Absolutely.
needs.
Thanks so much for being with us,
Thanks,
Bana.
Bana.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Onward and upward, and this
That is-
too shall
Get your
pass.
neck in. That's right. That's
You're so
right.
positive. I love it. All right, once again, Kathy Gott has devoted her professional life to finding solutions for special needs community. She's a member of the Los Angeles County Commission on Disabilities, senior consultant to government relations at ADA, and board member of Cornerstone Housing for Adults with Disabilities and the Spectrum Works. She is the president of Education Spectrum, Inc., a community-based educational and social skills training center for children and adults with autism spectrum disorders. Education Spectrum serves more than 400 families per year in and around the San Gabriel Valley. And if that's not enough, she's one of the founders of Danny's Farm, which employs and serves persons with special needs. Ms. Gott and her husband, Jim, are proud parents of 2 sons, both of whom are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
And I think she's unmuted.
I'm unmuting and then start my video. So there we go. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. And what a
I
great
haven't
background.
seen you in a while. It's so good to see you. Well, I see you, but not live with you. Hello.
Kathy.
What's that?
So good to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
We're so
Yeah.
thrilled. And gee, you're such a slouch. It's like you never get anything done, Kathy. You make the rest of us like, I'm like, man, how is she getting all that done? You inspire us. You inspire the rest of us as to what is possible. We always used to say, you know, everybody gets the same 24 hours and we all have the same 24 hours that Mother Teresa had. I'm going to start saying we all have the same 24 hours that Kathy Gott has, right? Because you're getting stuff done. But we invited you to talk about what's behind you, the village. And so let's start with
the perspective is a little off. I have to put the computer, but then I wouldn't be able to see anything. So.
It's okay. It's beautiful, and so are you.
It's really, really, really exciting. Thank you.
Well, what is it? What is the village?
It's not here yet. That is just a rendering, of course. But it will be an inclusive, independent apartment living, but it's so much more than that. But the intention is having a mix of residents on the spectrum, maybe other developmental differences that would be appropriate for the criterion, and then having lots of supports in and around the community that are customized to every individual. So as we all know, with federal regulations and moving into this wonderful person-centered space where it's not an institutionalized setting, it's not solely people with disabilities. Everything is all about embracing submersion, inclusion, acceptance. I mean, that for me is so beautiful. It warms my heart. And this project, The Village, is all about that. It's all about valuing every human being. Every human being deserves, and in this time with social justice being brought to the forefront, all the issues, there are so many inequities and systemic problems, and all we can do is do our best to exemplify what inclusion looks like, what love and acceptance looks like, and respect, mutual respect. So it's very exciting.
That
Tell
is
us
exciting.
yeah, it's very exciting, Kathy. Tell us where it's located and also the type of opportunities this location will offer for those.
Great, thank you. Well, it's just south of Beverly Hills on Pico near Beverly Drive. And it is, the neat thing is that it's a mixed use. So the first floor is retail, and we can't say yet who's going to be there, but we're working with people who embrace, everybody about this project has to embrace the intent behind it and what we're building. So it will provide right there vocational and employment opportunities for residents who choose that particular route. But it's in the center of a neighborhood, and lots of people out and about, and different, when there's no pandemic, of course, and shops, and it's about building within that community and beyond, where our residents will feel really embraced and welcomed and change that fabric of that community. So aside from that, there's teaching kitchen, and there's all opportunities to learn more independent skills. That's what this building is about. And then designed, of course, so that social situations will be encouraged, and you'll have to kind of walk past, let's say, a little nook with some other video game enthusiasts sitting around there, and then your apartment's over there, but you got to walk through there first. So a lot of encouragement. So we all about friendships and relationships and a community. So
This seems really unique. I think a lot of people have looked at the group living situation and lots of different ways, but this seems just really unique and uniquely suited to our population. I imagine that. How long have you guys been working on this?
Well, the idea was really born out of a group of people at ETA, and ETA is a large service provider for adults, and have group homes and a variety of different supports out in the community, and employment, and a lot of wraparound support. So it's been, I think, 5 or 6 years really since it started in the dream phase, and hired a market research company and did focus groups. And then, being that I get to travel with my husband all over the country, I always try my best in every place we go to go look at what's out there, as well as some other board, a lot of people have a lot of input, and there are some great, wonderful pioneers like First Place in Arizona. The thing is, I think why we're not seeing them so much here in LA is that it's very expensive. It's really expensive, which, thanks to philanthropists and foundations in our community that are opening their hearts to this capital campaign, because we couldn't do it without that. We just couldn't do it. And our board is amazing. So as you're probably aware, when the person the company or entity that's managing the property isn't going to be the same people who are providing services to its residents. That's just a safe, obvious way to check and balance. So Cornerstone, of which I'm on the board, is a completely separate entity from ETA, and I don't serve on ETA's board. And then, so this is the first. We hope that once this is up and running, the very next thing we do is start another project and do this all over again, as much as we possibly can. So the need is, as you know, I mean, we're moms, and as we age, what is the home life going to look like for our children? And it's, it varies. And this might not be, the solution for everybody. And that's good because, it's only 64 units. So we can't serve everybody. But it keeps us up at night, and knowing that this is this safe, nurturing, it's not lonely. It's, all those things we worry about. It's gonna get it covered. So it's very exciting.
How has the response from the community been to this in terms of people that are interested in living there?
We will not have trouble filling it. Thank you. It's been wonderful. And it just shows the need. And I do want to say that I am working with a variety of people in and out of regional center and are in California. And we're so lucky to have these entitlements, and I think we're all used to having services covered. So there will be different options for different situations with families as far as the rent goes to offset some of those costs and things of that nature. So it's going to be just a range of affordability.
And since this is, your goal is for this to be a part of the community, it's important that the community right now be working and helping and being involved. What can we be doing to make sure that this comes to fruition?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. I hope you'll put up some contact information because we do have an email address, and then I personally, along with some other people, but I look at all of them and respond every day. So of course, if you're in a position to give to our capital campaign, if we can't build the building, then there will be no village. So that's first and foremost. But as we move into later this year, early next year, we're going to be expanding into a lot of areas of committees. If you're interested in the programming aspect or a fundraising aspect, or being a potential resident, and so there's a newsletter. I mean, everything just started. Cornerstone didn't start until late last year. The board started meeting and was developed, and we found a piece of property, and then we bought it. And I mean, it's just, everything is so new and fresh. And, it's a 3-year construction from, breaking ground, which will be next year. And so it's a great time to get involved in the beginning and throughout. So that'd be wonderful.
So what is your proposed opening date?
2023, and it kind of depends on when we get our permits and everything through, but we're on like the expedited track, and everybody's been great, and getting everything into the city. And our board president, Cam Baboff, he doesn't have kids with disabilities at all. He's just a lovely man with a huge heart, donated a considerable 7 figures, and is overseeing this prize. He's a developer all over the world, built buildings. So I think we're in really good hands with his leadership, along with the other board members. So he knows what he's doing, and it's such an honor to serve on such an important project and meet such brilliant people. And it's been amazing. Very excited.
My breath always gets taken away when I hear about those kinds of people, these wonderful philanthropists that don't have a child on the spectrum, but have decided to put their heart, their time, and their money and invest it in our kids. It just humbles me. And I hope that when you next see this person, that you will tell them that we are sending love, and that they are a light on this planet that gives us all kinds of hope, because that's amazing.
Beautiful. I love that.
Nancy, aren't you the same way? Doesn't it just take your breath away when you hear that?
Absolutely.
Just absolutely. That's what we need more of in the world. And that's a light for everyone to see. So if have you already then started a waiting list for people to live there, or what will that look like, Kathy?
Well, there's nothing official, but I would say that we're gathering information from families who are interested, and then talking to them more about their child's needs, or we're talking directly to the individual. So, you know, every building that we will build will have a different flavor, a different goal. Just, you know, this particular project and a lot of, because of where it's situated, is designed for people who are working and out in the community and independent. It's not locked. You know, I know, like, for example, a mom called me, she said, well, what happens if my son, you know, leaves in the middle of the night? Well, you know, that's his or her, you know, they're free to go. This is not, you know, there's security at the building, but very good 24/7. It'll be safe, but we're not in the business of managing and controlling the residents' lives. Everybody has to have choice, and that thrills us. So it's very empowering when you're an adult and you get to decide where you want to eat, what you want to eat, what time, who you want to spend time with, you know, all of that. It's very important.
Yeah. Nancy, I want to take a second and go over some of the websites, because in our current format with Zoom, it's clunky when we put up a, you know, normally we would put up a lower third. It's a little clunky in our current format that we're doing with COVID. So I want to make sure people know, go to www.thecornerstonevillage.org. So thecornerstonevillage.org, or you can email them at info@thecornerstonevillage.org. They're also on Facebook under The Village by Cornerstone. So remember Cornerstone and Village, and you're going to be able to Google them, find them, email them, like them on Facebook, so that you can keep up on what's happening. But if you are a family, I would think if you're a family and you're wanting to be involved in this, now would be the time to do it. Not wait until the building is made. Get in on the ground floor, be a part of it, help to raise funds, help to be a part of what's happening, and be on one of those committees. I would think that would be the thing to do.
Wonderful. Yes.
And okay. Well, I think that this is absolutely remarkable. And I, you know, I did not know about it. So I'm thanking both of you and thanking Nancy for bringing it to our attention. But as Nancy said in the beginning, we've got a couple of more minutes here. You do so much, Kathy. Like, it's just so inspirational. It's dizzying how much you do. And it sounds like everything that you have done is culminated in this project. Is that part of how you got here?
You know, that's a great way of putting it. I love that. And thank you. And I love my work. I mean, it doesn't feel like work. It's my passion, and the people I've met along the way, including the two of you, is so meaningful, and it's my life. This is my life. It's such a part of defining who I am. And, you know, I think when I first started in this industry, because of seeing a need when our kids were early diagnosed and starting out their school years, that's when Education Spectrum was born, because these amazing people and opportunities just needed to come together. And that's been a wonderful thing. And then coming to the teenage years, when I start thinking about what are they going to do vocationally or for work, or, you know, post high school, that's when Danny's Farm was born, for our son Danny's, you know, tremendous affinity for animals. And so now we have this petting farm where there are, you know, dozens of adults with a variety of differences that come and they volunteer or they work, or, I mean, it's just beautiful. It's, you know, animals and people, you know, come on. It doesn't get any more beautiful. And then when I got to that kind of those transition years, that's when I started consulting with Etta, and we built a program called Transitions, and then some subsequent programs in partnerships with some community colleges, because I like, what I would like to really get your arms around and explain this need is that the kids from the 90s, the early 90s, are who need all these things now, and there's not enough. And that was when, you know, the incidence of autism was it went from, you know, 1 in 5,000, 1 in 10 to 1 in 5 during the 90s. So it was this, you know, relatively rare developmental disorder. And then it became like, huh, what's happening, and why is this happening? And then it's just, you know, it's just gone like this. So today it's 1 in 54. And back then it was, you know, 1 in 5 or 10,000. And now we have all these adults emerging. Just think 5 years down the road and 10 years down. And just, I mean, it is unbelievable when you really stop to think about how the need for housing, the need for supports, just because you turn 18 or 22 when you exit high school doesn't mean you need any less services. You know, it's not something you outgrow. So I'm just so passionate about adult services, and then having a chance to serve on the County Commission on Disabilities. I mean, talk about an amazing group of people, and I just love it. I just get really thrilled and goosebumps, you know, when I think about it.
Well, I'd love to know more. Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Tell us a little bit more about your role on the Los Angeles County Commission on Disabilities and what you do there.
Thank you. Well, as you all know, there's lots of disabilities, right? We've got people in wheelchairs and people with hearing and vision and, you know, all kinds of more physical disabilities. So Steve Miller, my predecessor on the commission, had just started a ad hoc committee for the developmentally disabled population, and I co-chair that with Jack, another commissioner, and so we made our priorities employment and housing. So what's been really enlightening and interesting, and I just have so much hope with working with the county, is that everybody, they want to do the right thing. I mean, I feel like the heart is there, the willingness is there. They're just, everybody's so separate, you know. It's like, oh, regional center, that's over there, and county does mental health, and that's over there. And, you know, we've been working, you know, and advocating to get specific carve-outs for our population. And, you know, we're making progress, and also with employment. I mean, please get in touch with me with any program that is looking to place people in employment. They have an amazing program where they're modifying the exam to get in, and you can get coaching on your application. And there's wonderful opportunities. The county is the largest employer in Southern California. So we're busy meeting people, uniting people, pulling people together so that everybody's not in their own little silo, and we come together and problem solve. So that's what's going on in the county, and it's been really embraced. It's very exciting.
That's thrilling.
I think I probably used the word exciting like 5 times already, and I'm so excited.
I'm good with it. I'm good, because it is exciting to hear those things. I always like to say that, you know, it's so thrilling when you find out that a whole group of people are working on something and you didn't even know about it, because it's like, oh, well, maybe there's even going on, right? And you go, there's hope that better minds are working on, because you know that every single parent that is watching this program has at some point worried and said, I don't know if my child's ever going to be able to work, and what's going to happen to my child when I'm not here anymore. Like, right? Isn't that the thing that everybody's awake at 3:30 in the morning thinking about that? And to know that amazing people like you and people that you know are working on it, Kathy, you've been the pioneer whose snowshoes we've all been following for years. And to know that you are still up to all this good, it's just so, it is exciting. Exciting is the right word. So I'm good with the use of the word. People are writing in and saying you're a rock star. I agree with that. Oh, wholeheartedly.
That's probably my husband.
It isn't unless he's changed his name. And people may not know who your husband is. Do you want to say who your husband is?
Well, today is a very special day. We're in Philadelphia because my husband, Jim Gott, whom I met over 30 years ago when he was pitching for the Dodgers, is now the bullpen coach for the Phillies. And it's opening day here in Philly.
How exciting.
It's for us, it's bigger than an anniversary. You know, it's opening day. And this is the first time in our marriage that we're not at a ballpark with a club that Jim is a part of and together, because there are no wives or, you know, any spectators at all at the field. So it's weird, it's odd, but you know, we're going to come together for the greater good and bring baseball and minimize risk. I go out as little as possible. So we're all just kind of, they go to the ballpark, come home, and everybody wants to stay healthy. So
That's amazing.
Does that mean you're going to be living in Philly?
we stay, yes, we've been here, this is our third year, but we come home during the off season, but during the season we're here in Philly. And what a great city this is. And they have so many amazing programs here for autism that I've gotten to know, and great people, and oh, what a wonderful, wonderful city. The team is lovely, people, the ownership, everything. I mean, the Phillies, I'm so proud to be in the Philly family. It's great.
Now you and Jim have two sons on the spectrum. Can you talk a little bit about them and what they're up to?
Sure. Well, Jim's son, CJ, lived with us in the very early years of our marriage, the first kind of six years, I think. And so he was diagnosed when he was living with us and started, you know, all kinds of interventions and programs. But CJ went back to live with his mom, and has lived with his mom and still lives with his mom in rural Pittsburgh, kind of well, I don't know, it's about an hour outside of Pittsburgh. And CJ is just lovely, just a sweetheart, and he's got, you know, variety of activities and programs, which I'm sure, like everybody else, everything's on hold. But he's happy, he's healthy, and that's CJ. Then Danny is, and CJ's 31, and Danny's turning, I cannot believe it, 27 next month. And he works at Danny's farm, which of course now we're doing all kinds of virtual activities, by the way. So if we have so many sponsors that have sponsored programs, we'd love to do more virtual petting farm field trips for our people. So get the word out that we'd love that. We're doing a lot of virtual classes, instruction about animal, just whatever the community needs, we're able to utilize the farm animals remotely. So that's been fun. So Danny's great, CJ's great. There's 4 other children in the clan, and so we have a big family. We have 2 grandkids and 1 on the way, and life is good, really good.
Wow, you do not look old enough to have grandchildren, so there you go.
Yeah.
Well, remarkable. And so when you're in Philly, then your Danny is here because he stays here and works at Danny's farm.
Yeah, Dan used to come quite a bit and visit, but I'll tell you, and I'm proud of all of our kids are being really careful. And Danny doesn't want to get on a plane. I mean, you know, when they shut down spring training, we went home to LA and we got 2.5 months with Danny and Danny's sibling, Nick. So that was really special. And then we just, you know, we're all doing our thing. So, yeah.
So again, you know, if people want to know more about any of the things that we've been talking about, but most specifically about the village, I probably should go through those websites again, and I don't know what I've done with them. Hang on one second. No, they're not there. I'll find them. I put them away, and I don't know what I did.
I can call them up, Shannon.
Can you? I have so many windows open, and I don't know where I've put them.
The website is www.thecornerstonevillage.org. And then you can email info@thecornerstonevillage.org. You can also go to Facebook for The Village by Cornerstone, and Instagram, The Cornerstone Village. So,
And
but once again, thecornerstonevillage.org is the website.
okay, but if they want to know more about Etta or about Danny's farm, is there a Kathy Gott website where it's all at, or do we go to into each individual thing?
You know, there isn't, but I think what I'll do is I'll put it in the comments. Would that
Okay, great.
be
That'd be
all right?
fabulous.
And I'll just send you some links, and then you can put it all together at some point. So that
All
would
right.
be great.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, especially on opening day. I didn't even think about that when we asked you about
This
today.
is just a great day. I mean, this is my world, and I get to share it with you today. It's so special. And of course, Jim was just bouncing off the walls this morning. Couldn't wait to get to the yard. So it's so
That's
much fun.
awesome. Well, you are a light for us, and thank you so much for all that you do, because it's so inspirational for all of us, and you've paved the way for so many of us. So thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Thank you for doing what you do and helping spread all this great stuff. So very
Our
appreciative.
pleasure.
Have a wonderful opening day. Our best to Jim. And
Thank you.
okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, just so inspirational. It
really gives you hope. You know, you think about what's out there for our kids, and we all, as you say, this is one of the issues that keeps us awake at night as parents. And it's just very hopeful that there are all of these new solutions out there and new solutions on the horizon coming every day.
Yes. And we always talk on the show about the power of one. And when Jem was little, there was that DVD, the movie. It didn't get very good reviews, but we loved it. He loved it. It was a movie, animated movie called Robots, and had some good music in it. I really recommend it. It's a very good show. But there's this whole thing. The theme of the show is, if you see a need, fill it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a young man who sees that the world needs to work a different way, and he doesn't know how to go about it, and he has to go through this, and he's a robot, and he has to go about it, changing the world because he sees a need. And I loved that lesson for my child. And I mean, you and I have sort of lived by that too over the years. When we've seen a need, I think if you stick around in the autism community long enough, everybody finds their niche. And over again on the show, we show and feature people who found their niche, all these wonderful autism parents who, one might write children's books, or another might raise money for grants like you have done in your life. Or I started a radio show that then later on, we started doing Autism Live. Everybody sort of finds their piece of the pie. It's just amazing to see that Kathy has done that like 8 times.
Right.
Every time because when she inherited the world of autism, it was like getting to the promised land and there's nothing there.
Right.
I love Reverend Beckwith always says, people want to get to the promised land, but they forget that when people got to the promised land, there were no curtains, there were no buildings, right? So Kathy would get to the promised land of autism and say, oh, there's nothing for my child, so I guess I'll create it. And that I always respect and admire that, but for Kathy, it sounds like, at every phase she had to invent it. But thank goodness for her, because so many of us came behind. And that, in my community, Emily Island had lived in my community with a child on the autism spectrum 10 years before I ever got there. So by the time my child was diagnosed with autism, I didn't need to go and create a program with the police to get them to understand that kids with autism wander. That was already done for me. So I could just check that box and move on. You know what I mean? So it's wonderful to live in Kathy Gott's community, because Kathy's creating stuff. Makes me want to run to catch up. Do you feel that way? Like you're like, what am I doing?
Right.
Well, we're doing our own thing. We're doing our own thing.
Right. She's so proactive, and she's done so many things to help our community.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And now I love that I didn't even have to ask her. You didn't have to ask her. It was like, okay, so you're building this in Los Angeles, but what next? She's already got the plan to build them all over the place. So
Right, 'cause there's
how
just
exciting is that?
64 units are going to fill up very fast. And that's the problem. There's just not, there's still not a lot out there for our kids in terms of living situations. So,
But I love that there are businesses on the ground floor so that it does create an opportunity to work and to be a consumer. I mean, you know, I love living more in suburbia, and I also don't mind living in more rural areas. But one of the things I loved as a young person about living in New York City was, you know, my friend lived above a pizza parlor, and you know, dinner was always available, very inexpensively, and it was how we lived, and you were within walking distance of where you worked, and you know, where you purchased your vegetables and you ate your dinner. and and I remember that being a very great time as a young person, and I love picturing individuals on the autism spectrum having that opportunity right there where they live, with people who have an understanding of who they're sharing space with. That seems very exciting to me. We had another news story that we were going to
yes,
cover at the beginning, and we
you want
ended
to
up
cover that
taking a little
now?
bit more time with Vena. But yes, we've got about 4 minutes left, and I'd love to just talk about it briefly. That there is a new show on Netflix. I haven't yet been able to watch it, but I'm excited about it. It's a show that was in the making for a really long time. Have you had the opportunity to see it yet?
I haven't had the opportunity to see it. It's
But it's
getting
getting great reviews.
rave reviews. It's called Love on the Spectrum. And it said at first sight, it appears to be an Australian version of the Undateables without the crude name, because it follows the lives. And I haven't seen the Undateables either. I don't know
I had
where that,
heard about it, but I had not seen it.
right. But this
Australian.
appears to be an Australian version of it. And it says it's following the dating lives of people on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
Uh, and apparently it's incredibly well done. The couples that they follow are endearing and have a lot to offer in terms of opening up our perceptions of what love is like for
Yeah.
young people on the spectrum. So I'm really excited to take a look at it.
I'm excited to take a look at it too. I mean, there have been several other shows about love when somebody is on the autism spectrum. And, you know, those have been exciting too. Most of them, the people had already met and had been through the dating phase and were deciding if they wanted to be together. And that was wonderful and endearing. What I love about the idea about this one is that, you know, they go on a date and they see that, okay, this is not the right person, and so I'm going to date somebody else. And I don't think we have had that kind of a situation featuring folks on the spectrum. I haven't seen it, and I think that that's really exciting, because I think the closest that we've come to it is the other show on Netflix, which why am I not think the Penguin one? What is the name of that show? I
The
can't think of the
penguin
name.
one?
With Sam, he loves penguins. Our good friends are the producers of it. I can't think of the name of it. Help me, you guys. I'm having a senior moment.
I can't think of the name of it either, Shannon.
It's not The Good Doctor. It's the other one. Sam and the Penguins. What the heck is the name of it, you guys?
Atypical?
Atypical. Thank you. All I could see was the A, and I couldn't see anything else. I
Right.
totally had a senior moment. But in that, we get to see Sam dating people, but that's a fictitious show. And that's only focusing on one person. So there's only so much. But even that, I loved having that, so that it put a baseline for people to start talking about dating. But I'm really excited about seeing this show. And the thing that I'm hoping is that the individuals that were a part of the filming were well treated, because I've heard some complaints from other, not Atypical at all. Everybody's been great on Atypical, but some of the other shows that were done about love in the autism community, I've heard some complaints about the filming process, that it was particularly hard for the participants. So I'm hoping that it went well. What we've heard is that the families are featured, and how much the families love their kids on the spectrum who are doing the dating, that is front and center and featured, how important it is to have support. So I'm really glad that that's there. Now we're almost out of time, but Rosina's written in and said, what's the advice you can give to someone who wants to start this job? And I don't know which job you were particularly talking about, but if you are looking, you can email me, s.penrod@autism-live.com. Because I want to know specifically what you were talking about. And so thrilled that you're here with us. And someone else said, are there group homes for high functioning individuals on the autism spectrum in New York and Long Island? And I'm not aware of anything, but I can tell you that there's a great resource page on Autism Speaks, where you can go to look at living situations. I don't know that there is right now for high functioning in the New York City area. But we'll look into it. We'll definitely look into it. But it's a thing that's time has come, right? There should be. I know that in New York City, there is a group, not a group home, but there is a group that is just for women on the spectrum. It's like a secret society in that you can't be a part of it unless you're invited to join, but it is, I know people that participate in that group, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's some very high functioning people who, are doing great, and they're sharing information with other young women. And that's a fabulous thing. But other than that, I'm not entirely aware, but we'll look into it. All right, we are totally out of time.
Yes.
But I wanted to give a programming update for next week. On Monday, we've got Bonnie Yates, and we're going to be talking about education and what everybody should be doing right now so that you're having your IEP meetings to get your distance learning plans pinned down. Like, that's what needs to be happening in the beginning month of August. Then on Tuesday, I'm very excited about this. We thought it was going to be on Friday. It's not going to be on Friday. On Tuesday, we are having Karen Nolte and Leah Hirschfeld is going to be with us from the research department at CARD, and they're going to be presenting on research about distance learning, education, about what works, what doesn't work, so that we can have some sort of awareness when we're at those meetings with our school district about what works and what doesn't work. So that's wonderful. I am told that we definitely have Dr. Grampiche back on Wednesday, that she is going to be with us on Thursday. Dr. Evelyn Gould is going to be with us. She used to be a regular on the show. She finished her doctorate. She's now Dr. Gould. And she's going to be talking with us about acceptance, commitment, therapy, and how great it is for families and individuals on the autism spectrum. And I'm going to be taking off the next few Fridays. And so we're going to be playing some reruns of Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and just for the month of August. But then we will be back in September with some more shows. So I got to take off a few Fridays here, and I apologize to Nancy for it, because Nancy's awesome.
No problem, Shannon.
But I appreciate your patience, everybody. Got to spend some time with the boy. We got to get ready for the senior year here. So thrilled to be here with all of you guys. Thank you so much, Nancy, for being here. We wanted to thank Kathy and Vana for being here.
Vana's already written to me saying thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, she is so awesome.
Yeah.
What a privilege to be with three such amazing women during the show. We are going to be back on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.